Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of City Council, January 27th, 2020. This meeting will now come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Coviello,
Present.
Kariosha,
Here.
Costin. Here. Gunter.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Stout.
Here.
Welsh.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
All present.
Okay, let's go on. Item 4 is business. 4A is citizens' input. Citizens' input time, a maximum of 60 minutes is set for input of citizens on matters concerning city government. 3 minutes per individual. Please remember to state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Joe Kilrain, a resident of District 3. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to comment. My comments are not directly related to any agenda items, but pretty much in request for updates on various status on some evaluations that are underway. Although I think that the D&D property has the opportunity to provide the city with great saltwater access and boat ramps and slips, which is something we greatly need, I prefer not to comment on it until we have a more fully informed presentation. First item of update would be progress in developing the job spec for the city manager. Again, my point of focus on this is not only finding someone who can keep the trains running on time, but someone who has the vision and capacity to take us to that next level, and in particular to bring new business and have that vision to be able to interact with the council on their direction as to where we headed to get business in here. So that's a primary concern, and I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to take a look at that if it is available. Second would be in a CRA meeting recently in October or November, there was mention as to an update on infrastructure plan as to abilities to overcome some impediments that might be barriers to developers coming in and developing further the downtown area. And I think that City Manager Zerlak and Ricardo Nagara, we're going to be putting together something on it, and I would like to just find out a status on that, where that is, and where that might be available. Third, I have to commend Councilman Gunter on bringing forward the 60-40 impervious issue, and to the extent that we've had progress on it, I would love to hear about that. Lastly, progress on the macro hydrology study, or the stormwater plan that was developed back in 2015. I think that if that thing could be updated and provide good database, we'd be able to have a better informed management process to be able to pursue the Matlacha lock or the Chiquita lock issue, as well as the impervious issue. So those are the 4 items. I thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Christopher Specht, S-P-E-C-H-T, and I live in District 1. And these 2 owls you see up on the display are the 2 burrowing owls that live in Bernice Braden Park, right by the Chamber of Commerce. They're the same owls that reestablished a burrow after being evicted last year for the red, white, and boom. If the city were to spend $1 million putting together a owl exhibit at a welcome center, these guys did all the work. They put it in the perfect spot where it's at the edge of the field, that cameras can be set up, and it can be a great exhibit for the city. They're even loved on YouTube. I did a lot of research with the city, some document requests, found some documents that what I was told did not exist. But before I go into that, I just want to say that I'm not advocating moving red, white, and boom. I'm not advocating getting rid of the owl removal permit. I think that we can have both. They're on the edge of the park, and the owls that time of year only need a radius of 10 feet. So 10 feet, pi r square, so it's 141.15926535 feet. That's it. Or 314 feet, I'm sorry. It's not much space out of 167,000 square feet that we use, 300 to 500 feet. As a welcome center, it would be great if we could put a small walkway right in that area where the owls have already set up their burrow, and that red dotted line shows the perimeter for a 33-foot barrier around the owls. That leaves the whole rest of the park for human enjoyment. The only thing that I see is from Johnson Engineering, this display that I've been told does not exist is the layout for red, white, and boom. And over here is for the fireworks staging area. The yellow is for the bleachers, vendors, and specialty area. 1 is Kids Patriot Park activities and vendors. 2 is the bathroom and event organizers. 3 is the beer vendor. And this teal, or green, number 4, is the city VIP staging area. That's your seats, council members. We grew up being taught that if we're on a bus, we let the elderly have our seat. If somebody's handicapped, we give them our seat. We are not asking you to give up your seat. We're just asking you to move your seat so that the disadvantaged owls can survive. We should be embracing our wildlife, not kicking them out. I understand that everybody gets on the defensive. But in this case, can we just try and work together with them? That's all I'm asking. I'm not a part of a group. I talk to Friends of Wildlife, but I'm not part of them. It's just me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I'm Jim Kelly. I'm here on behalf of D&D Bait Shop. This morning, Ms. Debbie Root had emailed everybody. I'm not sure if you got the email or not, but what I like to do now is possibly be able to read this to be able to put it into the record. May I do that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Dear Mrs. Burns, my name is Debbie Root. I am the city's tenant and owner of D&D Matlacha Bait and Tackle Store. I understand that the city council will be discussing the fate of the city's property at the entrance to Matlacha at Monday's council meeting. Would you please be so kind to forward my email attachments to each of the council members for me? The attached link is to a petition to keep D&D Bait and Tackle Store open. This is a petition that we started last Monday, January 20th, and as of today, we have over 1,001 signatures who have signed it, and now we have over 340 comments in support of our bait shop in only 1 week. As you may be aware, I have partnered with the City of Cape Coral to collect the boat ramp fees. I have been keeping track of where the people using the ramp live since Christmas break. There are 150 customers that use the boat ramp during this time, of which 95% of the folks are from the City of Cape Coral. Our ramp is not just being used by residents of Pine Island and Matlacha. In fact, the only real time that these people use our ramps when all other public ramps are full with nowhere to park. I have been told by many who come to my shop that they didn't understand the whole annexation issue, and we're very surprised when the council voted not to go through with it. Many customers and fishing guides have told me they were going to reach out to each council member and request the city to keep the property and build a new boat ramp, restaurant, and bait shop facility, and I hope they do so. I will be attending the city council meeting with many of our supporters. I pray that you consider developing the property as planned. Any thoughts of selling to private investors would be devastating to not only my family, but our community. The love and passion, my business and fishing family as well, customers and community. Thank you for your time and consideration of this matter. Sincerely, Debbie Ruth. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. For your record, I'm Russell Schropp. I'm an attorney that represents GA Pinnacle Cape Coral LLC. My brief comments today are directed to the second item on your agenda under discussion, which pertains to a plan amendment for about 1,238 acres in northern Cape Coral. The property that's the subject of this plan amendment was part of the Zemmel holdings that were annexed into the city back in 2006. GA Pinnacle acquired this property about 4 years ago in 2016, along with other former Zemmel property that fronts on Burnt Store Road that has already been incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan under the mixed-use land use classification. The remainder of the property that's subject to the plan amendment that's coming up has been without a comp plan designation in the city, even though it was annexed 13 to 14 years ago, and the current owner, GA Pinnacle, has been waiting patiently for the last 3 or 4 years while the city went through the changes to the comp plan and zoning process that you went through. Once those changes were completed, the owner filed this plan amendment in early 2019 and would like to proceed forward with the plan amendment and ultimately a PUD for the project. The PUD would include primarily residential on the property that's subject to the plan amendment, but there's also 255 acres that have already been included in the mixed-use land use classification that fronts on Burnt Store Road. The ideal would be to ultimately do a mixed-use plan unit development that would include residential, commercial mix of property on the entirety of the holdings. From reviewing the materials that were included in the agenda package, it appears that staff has some concerns with utilities extension, and we're aware of those concerns. We understand the concern, and we recognize the need to provide for utility extensions, and also recognize that we may be in advance of the city's efforts, and therefore the utility extensions may be developer funded as we get there, but we certainly would like the opportunity to get there. Both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission have recommended approval of this plan amendment, and we would appreciate it if it could be moved forward. If you have any questions during your discussion on this agenda item, in addition to myself, the owner is here, as well as our entire team, our planner, engineer, traffic planner, and environmental consultant, and we'd be happy to address them at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council members, at the last general council meeting on January the 13th,
Your name, ma'am?
oh, sorry, Mona Farquharson,
Thank you.
sorry. So I'll start again. At the last general council meeting on January the 13th, I asked very politely if there had ever been a water safety study completed related to the very short S-curve and short sight lines on the curve at Tropicana Park. The only council member who responded was Councilman Williams, who stated that during his own boating experience on January the 11th, that the site was not safe and a police presence was necessary. On the morning of January 24th, I met with Councilwoman Stout and Carrie Runyon on site at the Tropicana Park and found that their response was basically the same, that a police presence is necessary at that site. At this meeting, I asked about the potential increased traffic related to the development of the 7 Isles. The answer I received was, if and when it ever happens. I asked about growth and the water traffic study related to the length of the leases for the kayak and rowing clubs being approximately 20 years. The answer from Carrie Runyon was, we can cancel the leases at any time. I asked, what about the buildings that are left behind? The answer was, we are not paying for them. All of these answers are unsatisfactory and can be potentially creating serious problems. The council is considering having children and boaters in the same small area of water that at least 2 members of council have recently stated requires police presence. This site deserves serious reexamination. Mr. Mayor, as a trailblazer, in an interview you had on November 1st, 2019, with the Cape Coral Breeze, you stated that you will establish policy and lead a team of elected officials dedicated to safety, well-being, and the prosperity of Cape Coral citizens. Mr. Mayor, I am respectfully asking you to do that now and choose another site for the kayak and rowing clubs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Chris Camerata. I'm a resident of Cape Coral since 1991. Just a quick comment on the charter schools. I was here a couple weeks ago, and I asked the charter schools and the funds being held up in the courts. I asked a question about that. Now, given that the city must have status in the case, what are you doing, or what more could we be doing to ensure a successful conclusion to funding our children's education in the Cape Coral Charter School system? Now, I only ask council to please engage when and where possible to help the court make the right decision. Now, it's coming up in a few weeks or in a month, but whatever it is, I just only ask council to get involved. And just one more comment on a positive note was the 50th birthday party of Cape Coral, and I think we should put this to attention, how good it was. Most of you guys were there. The mayor said some great words. City manager was there. It was very positive for the Cape. I'd like to personally thank Gloria Rasso for doing the right thing. She's like Wonder Woman when it comes to these things. And while I was at the 50th birthday party, I drove right by the yacht club area, the beach area, and just what an amazing transformation the place has been. We got rid of that old rickety building. You got new bathrooms on there. It's great for the taxpayers. It's great for the Cape, and it's money well spent. I just think it's a positive note, and somebody should bring it to light. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Richard Osman, and I live on the Southwest Cape. About a month ago, I brought up a question here in front of the council, and I wasn't able to come back the following week to see if there was an answer for it, so I'm just wondering if an answer was attained, and I just missed out understanding it. I had mentioned I'd seen a lot of unmarked vans in the area, and sometimes I can see they're delivering, but other times I don't know. Maybe they're picking up things. And the question is, are these unmarked vans supposed to be registered with the city so we can recognize when they're legally doing things here? And maybe we can count on packages being taken from people's houses as well as being delivered. So if you have that answer, I'd appreciate someone mentioning it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Mansfield, Deborah Root's dad. I help her out at the store over there. And I was just wondering that with the store over there, out of the 81 pieces of property that were bought in that package deal, it seems like that's the only one that you collect rent on, you pay no taxes, we pay the insurance. So it's a zero balance, plus you collect the rent and part of the parking. And I just don't see where, I don't know, if you had 81 cows and only one was given milk, what would you sell? Would you have no milk in your coffee the next day? That's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor and City Council, my name's Rob Hargrove, and I just wanted to voice my opinion tonight on D&D Bait and Tackle. I've been going there for years. I believe the business itself is iconic in the area. Deb and her family provide a great service for the area, and they're great people. They give back to the community as well. They're not just conducting a business, they give back to the community. So I believe any plan by the City of Cape Coral to possibly shut down or have the place shut down, or that would include it being shut down, would be short-sighted on behalf of the council and the mayor. So that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mayor and City Council, my name's Aaron Hardgrove. I'm not a very good public speaker, so I want to make this fast and sweet. I've been going to D&D Tackle ever since I was a little kid, and they've made a big impact on my life. Fishing is all I got, you know, that's what I look forward to on the weekends when I'm not working. They've earned their rightful place. They're good people, and they do give back when they can. So I just wanted to put my opinion out there, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Captain Jack LaPlante, Captain Jack Boat Tours in Matlacha. I support D&D. I'm hoping to have a new marina, or at least a place I can rent from them to put my tour company and support Cape Coral and Matlacha. We are interested in leasing from them as soon as they are available, and if there's a temporary lease, we'd be interested in that. We see a lot of potential there, and we have a lot of customers coming in every year, and we need a nice, secure place. The fence around is wonderful, and the people there are also wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. My name is Christopher Root. I am Debbie's brother-in-law, and her and my brother saw an opportunity to help the community and build a good business that would go through generations of family. And 20 years ago, they started that, and they have built it into what it is today. And during the time, they have given back to the community. They have helped out with their tournaments, Lee Memorial Hospital, done a lot of things and given back a lot. And like it was stated earlier, over the last week or so, we've asked people for their help, and we've recorded where the people have come from. And, you know, it was actually, when I was tallying up records to see where these people were coming from, it was actually pretty surprising to see that there was so much more people from Cape Coral using the property, using the ramp, and not just using the boat ramp, but coming there every weekend with their family, with their children. And we're not talking about just one or two people. We're talking about a lot of people that have been coming for generations. They have started out there as children, and now they're bringing their children, their grandchildren to come there and fish and just have a good time with their family on the property. And so it's not just about coming in and getting bait and tackle. It's about a place where you can take your family and build memories and do all these things and help the community, and, you know, and we want to continue giving back to the community. And also the fact that, you know, everybody has to take in consideration that Cape Coral has more canals than any other place on the planet. And shutting down these boat ramps and getting rid of these parking spaces, as we discussed 2 years ago, that once those spaces are gone, you're not going to get them back. And it would just, in my opinion, from what I've seen and been here in this time, that it would be a poor decision for the city of Cape Coral and for the community to lose that. And I would just hope you would all really take into consideration to not sell the property and to vitalize it and give it a facelift and make it and let it be the potential that it has been and can continue to be, so we can keep giving back to the community and helping out and doing tournaments and all these things that has been going on for the last 20 years. And there's really not a reason to shut it down when it has been doing so well, and there is a lot of people behind it. So I would just like you all to please take that into consideration before you make any final decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dee Brennan, and I work at D&D. I'm not a very good speaker, but I am pretty good at speaking my mind. I guess the main thing I want to say is we were here at the last meeting for the annexation, and I just want the city council to know that the people that were here is just a minute, small portion of the people that live on Pine Island and Matlacha, and the way that they acted, in my opinion, was unruly. And I just want to say that they don't represent Matlacha or Pine Island. I mean, you're talking about a small amount of people. And the second law is I lived on Pine Island my entire life. And as that gentleman said, if it wasn't for the bait shop and for fishing, a lot of us probably wouldn't be standing here today. So I think that you should take state and the people, I'm sure, Mayor, that your office was flooded with phone calls and for people that was for D&D staying there. So I just want you to take in consideration those people and not the ugly people that you seen at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, Mayor, my name is Lee Lallmeyer. I'm a resident in the city of Cape Coral. I've been going to D&D for about 5 or 6 years now. Every weekend, they can tell you I'm a regular. I'm there first thing in the morning. I'm there at the end of the day. It would really help to see the place get a facelift. Not so much sell it. It would hurt a lot of people. And just think about what the people really want, not what the city wants. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Ann Sweeney. Good evening, all. I feel bad for what has been said about D&D and the possibility of not staying there. I just wish some of these people had been here and stood up for us at the city of Cape Coral when we were trying to annex that particular property, who just happens to belong to the city of Cape Coral. I think they had one heck of a nerve to try and tell us what to do with our piece of land that we were trying to improve. Every council member was surprisingly in agreement with everything. We took a lot of heat from the people of Matlacha. I wish citizens would come forward with positive thoughts once in a while and not just come here to complain about everything and tell us what we should do with our property. They could have been a little bit more supportive. Instead, there's a lot of money that's looming over a lot of our heads because of their ill remarks and ill will towards the city of Cape Coral. So I do hope you find a way to handle this properly for the benefit of the people of Cape Coral. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Richards from Southeast Cape. I'm a homeowner, and I also use that canal 2 to 5 times a week, typically launching from Burnt Store public launch. There's 2 reasons there's 3 reasons I use that launch. Number 1 is I can buy a sticker and not have to pay $10 every single time. And number 2, the boat ramps at D&D are dilapidated, and the problem is exacerbated when there's tidal movement. The tide rips right through that area. And so looking at some of the plans, I do see as part of the city's plan that you'd move the boat ramp. I think that's a great idea, getting it out of the main cut. Me and some of my friends, we've been talking about fuel, the availability of fuel. There's no place on that water for fuel. talking about the sticker. If the city of Cape Coral is going to get involved in anything, there's got to be something in it for the citizens, right? The people who would use this day in and day out. Would save 15 minutes off of my trip every day and cause a lot less traffic on some of those back canals. And look, I'm a big customer of D&D. Been going there for years. I grew up here. Fishing is my hobby. And I've got nothing against D&D. However, me and my friends and other fishermen, we can't help but to discuss what a sweetheart deal it is for those guys. None of us could answer or find, in newspaper articles or anything, what that $10 launch fee goes to. We've seen that. We've seen the deterioration of that, of the boat ramps there in that whole area. It's $10 a pop every time, and we buy the shrimp from them. They do big business there. It's just not a boat launch. So what's in it for the city of Cape Coral? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak during citizens' input? Seeing none, citizens' input's now closed. Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I've been making a list here. Let me start at the top. The owls down on Cape Coral Parkway. That's probably not a bad idea, but I think you're talking about just shifting the VIP tent a little bit closer to the bridge and leave the owls in that space between the parking lot and the tent. My confusion is it's not so much the tent being there, but at the 40, 50, or 60,000 people that are going to be wandering around there during Red, White, and Boom. I would think that they're going to disrupt the owls a little bit, even if they don't, do anything to fill in the hole, but just being there and talking and pointing and taking pictures. And I hate to see that collapsed. I don't like to do that anywhere. I'm not sure how I would want to protect the owls, though, because you're still going to get 50 or 60,000 people. And the only way to protect the owls is to cancel the event, and I don't think that's in the cards. So I guess I'm a little confused on, other than the fact that you'd like the tent moved out of the way, maybe that'd be best to leave it there because there's fewer people in the tent that are wandering around. But anyway, I just wanted to throw out my confusion on that whole thing. Unfortunately, humanity is pushing a lot of wildlife out of the city, and it's just a fact of life. I mean, the human race is growing, the country is growing, the city especially is growing, and there's only so much real estate. And the owls and the turtles and all of that are being affected negatively. Maybe the answer is to find a mitigation point where they could be like Rotary Park. We have wildlife in Rotary Park that live a fairly quiet, protected life. So I don't know the answer to that. I just wanted to let you know that I was listening. So.
Can I give a 1 second answer?
Yeah, 1 second. Thank you.
The owls, if you protect that 10 feet, the owls will either retreat into the burrow or most likely fly away for the day, and like they did this past year, they will fly back and go back to the burrow. The difference is we are not destroying their home and stressing them more. That's it.
Okay. I suggest you talk to Parks and Recreation. They are the ones that work on putting that event, and they would have the authority to move the tent or do whatever needs to be done if it's agreeable to them, but they're the ones that do that particular thing. Somebody commented on 81 pieces. I assume that was 81 pieces of land. It's 491 pieces of land that we got on that big purchase that was made. A good portion of that land was bought, and the reason we did this to begin with is we have UEP expansion going on up there, and a lot of this property is going to be used for that effort, and that just prevented us from having to go out and buy individual pieces all over the place. D&D was part of it. We didn't want it, we didn't solicit it, but the 7 islands and that piece of property next to D&D were part of the deal, take it or leave it. So we took it because we needed the rest of the land. As far as the
What's going to happen there, I'm not sure. I don't want to see D&D go. I go in there, I shop. I've got 2 of their fishing rods hanging in my garage. It's a good place. I'd like to prevent them from having to leave. I'm not excited about putting a lot more traffic in that area. I don't know how many people you try to get on Pine Island on a Friday afternoon. It's a real treat, and this is just going to exacerbate that situation. I'm not high, and we're going to be talking about this later, but I'm not, and the city manager already knows, I'm not enthused about the restaurant. Repairing the existing ramp makes a lot of sense. Fixing the docks behind it make a lot of sense, but anything beyond that, I don't know. I advocate selling the property. The reason that we ended the annexation effort was we were just sick and tired of the constant battle we're having with Matlacha. No matter what we try to do in this city, they shove it right back at us. And I'll guarantee, if we want to put a restaurant and add another ramp there, they're going to shove it back at us. Let's just stop. Let's sell the land, let it go away, and be done with it. So that was the basis for my motion at that meeting, to just stop. Let's stop the fighting. The lady that commented about me saying that the S-curves were dangerous. The S-curve is dangerous when you've got a boat coming around it on plane. The S-turn is dangerous when somebody's coming through there not obeying the law. Other than that, it's fine. It's no problem at all. The City of Cape Coral, the police department, has already agreed to up their controlling that, issuing tickets. And when you get caught speeding in a boat, it's the same as getting a speeding ticket in a car. It's points on your license. And they're going to start giving tickets. No more friendly, you better slow it down. No, here, pay a couple of $100. It's a dangerous curve. Anywhere on the spreader where a boat is speeding is dangerous or destructive to the environment. So we're upping the police presence, and hopefully the S-curve will no longer be any kind of a safety hazard. As long as boats follow the law, we're okay. We're not going to cater to the people that want to break the law by not doing something that the city needs to do. That's it. For this, I'll have more to say when it comes time when we're talking about the D&D property. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stout.
Yes, I have comments about the D&D bait shop and that property, but I'll wait until it comes up on the agenda. I do want to address going to Tropicana Park last Friday morning. I was pleased that our Parks and Rec director could take me out and show me the different plans that could happen there. We were out there maybe 30 or 40 minutes, and there was one boat, only one boat during that period of time. I did mention if there are concerns in the future, when that area is more built up, that there could be warnings or some kind of signs placed in the water. I've seen them since my husband is a great boater. I've seen these signs in other areas. There's no reason why a sign couldn't be there to draw attention to any kind of potential safety issue. I don't see anything that prevents that from happening. I don't believe that the kayaks and the rowing club can go to a residential area. That just doesn't make sense. You would be impacting a residential area. This is a park that I see can be used for all. It's not a private club. Anybody can join it that lives in Cape Coral, and maybe beyond. I don't know exactly the rules. However, I was appreciative of being able to go out and take a look for myself rather than just seeing it on a piece of paper. Thank you.
Councilmember Gunter.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if the city manager can give us an update on the one item that the resident spoke about. And I understand that we were doing an infrastructure study downtown Cape Coral near the Bemney Basin. Can you advise when we should have that study completed?
Absolutely. A little bit of a background. This matter came up about 4 or 5 months ago when we had a planning charrette for the CRA area. And it was mentioned that, well, even though we may improve the zoning to have increased verticality, what about the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the stormwater? And so I had tasked Ricardo Noguera, Economic Development Manager, to essentially take charge of a group of directors that would include Vince Cotero, Paul Klingen, Kevin Higginson, and Jeff Pearson relative to all the infrastructure that we want to put in there. And that is ongoing. I'm going to look to my left to see if I can get a sense of timing. I don't want to give an artificial date and then have Vince or Ricardo say, hey, John, I can't make that date. So if I may, Ricardo, how far away are we on that matter?
Under the bus.
Not at all.
I would say we have one more meeting internally, staff, and then we'll go to the city manager within the next 2 weeks. So we're just about there.
Okay.
And then I'll share that with mayor and council as well. And if I may, Councilmember Gunter spoke to me a few weeks ago, if I recall, about finding emerging markets, not just for the CRA area, but for all of the city of Cape Coral. And that I relayed that at a staff meeting. Again, asked Ricardo when trying to find those emerging markets to also determine what infrastructure needs we would have in terms of where they could be placed. An example would be a medical Main Street, something like that.
Okay, thank you. Also, as far as D&D, I'll reserve my comments to when we have that presentation. And lastly, I know the gentleman brought up the unmarked vehicles as far as deliveries. I don't think there's any regulation in the city, but I would ask if someone from staff could get with that resident to get that answer for him. And that's all I have.
We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, because it was brought up again, and I thought we addressed it the last time it was brought up, the funds for the charter schools that are being held, we're going to hear about that relatively soon. And it's just in an escrow account, and that's in legal litigation. So we don't have access to those funds, and the charter schools don't have access to it until they solve their litigation, right? Am I correct?
I'm not sure. I'd like to give an example of fire service assessment where we had actually collected over $20 million and made the decision to keep it in escrow, because if we were at the Supreme Court level and we knew if we lost, we'd have to refund the money that we had already spent, and we could not afford to do that. As far as the monies being held in escrow for the charter schools, because it is the state and the district that's involved, I'm going to ask our city attorney if she knows about the nuances of whether that money could be held or spent. If it could be spent, as manager, I still recommend that we do not spend it for the same reasons we did not spend our fire service assessment.
Madam City Attorney?
I would have to verify that, but again, at the very least, my belief is that you do not spend that money, because if you spend it because you're needing money, then after you've spent it, if you have to pay it back, then you're going to be that much further away from the money that you need.
I don't think anybody's looking to spend it. I think we just want to know
whether it's an option.
No, I don't think we want to utilize it until we know for sure whether it's available. But it's been sitting in escrow now for, I would say, well over a year. Okay, and it's just a matter of when do you think it'll move forward to a decision one way or the other?
I would have to verify when that's coming forward, but obviously not until the conclusion of the litigation, and as counsel is very much aware, litigation has a life of its own.
Okay, thank you. Any other council comments? Okay, let's move on to item 4B, discussion, presentation of the Utilities Department Annual Report. Mr. Pearson?
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Jeff Pearson, Utilities Director. On behalf of the City of Cape Coral Utilities Department, I'm pleased to provide the Water and Wastewater and Irrigation Annual Report. The purpose of this report is to comply with Section 5.18 of the City of Cape Coral Water and Sewer Refunding Revenue Bonds, Series 2003. We had hired AECom, a large engineering firm, to look at our system and make some determinations. Some of the determinations that they made are that the city can meet our O&M, operating and maintenance obligations, through our established rates and produce the required net revenues, expansion fees, and special assessment proceeds. Our utility system is maintained and operated in an efficient and economical manner, and renewal and replacement expenditures are proper, and the disposition of revenues is in accordance with all bond covenants, and the city has exceeded the minimum debt service coverage requirements as required by the bond resolution, and our facilities insurance requirements are adequate. I have Ron Cavalieri here, who headed up the group that comes out every year and looks at our system and makes sure that we're in good shape, and he's got a short PowerPoint presentation for you. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Ron Cavalieri, and I work with AECom Consulting Engineers here in Fort Myers. Just go ahead and have a, can you,
There it is.
okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay, as Jeff mentioned, AECom prepared the fiscal year 2018 utilities annual report, and the report is prepared in compliance with Section 5.18 of the city's bond resolution. The slide presentation includes a summary of the findings of the fiscal year 2018 annual report. And Jeff pretty much just, recited all of these, so this executive summary provides a summary of the findings of the annual report. And the utility system was found to be in good operating condition and meeting all of the requirements of the city's bond resolution. This slide shows an overview of the organization structure for the utilities department, and then also provides a mission statement for the utilities. This slide shows an overview of the city's potable water system, shows the location of the North Water Treatment Plant, the Southwest Water Treatment Plant, and an overview of the various facilities within the utility system. And we did find that the potable water system was determined to be in good operating condition. We also looked at the regulatory requirements for the potable water system, and we found that, again, the city's potable water utilities are in compliance, meets all federal drinking water standards and state drinking water standards. And, one of the things I'd like to point out is, just as an illustration of the high-quality water that the city's utilities department produces, is it was a winner of the Florida section of the American Water Works Association Region 5 winner for the best tasting drinking water contest in 2017. This slide provides an overview of the wastewater system within Cape Coral. Again, it shows the location of the Everest Water Reclamation Facility, the Southwest Water Reclamation Facility, and the collection and conveyance system within Cape Coral. Again, we completed a regulatory review of the wastewater system. Again, we found that the city was in compliance with the wastewater collection conveyance. It's meeting all of its operating permits and, for the operation of the wastewater plants, deep injection wells. And again, one of the things that the city was recognized for was a certificate of recognition from the Water Environment Federation for a water resource utility of the Future Today Award. Again, just an illustration of the operation and excellent performance of the city's utility system. This slide shows the irrigation quality water system. Again, we found the system to be in good operating condition. Shows the location of the canal pump stations and most of the water supply to the irrigation quality water system does come from the city's freshwater canal system. And again, I'd also like to point out that the city did receive from the Florida Water Environment Association the David W. York Award for the Water Independence for Cape Coral Utility Expansion Program. This slide just shows, just illustrates that the capacity of the plants, the water treatment plants, the water reclamation facilities are well within, the rated capacity of those plants are well within the projected demands and flows for the city, so it's able to meet all of its demand and flow requirements now and for the immediate future. And then this slide is a summary of the capital improvement plan budget. The city is projecting to spend about $160 million for utility capital projects over the next 5 years, so that the city can continue to comply with standard regulations, and while also maintaining the ability to effectively meet service demands and flows for the utility system. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Okay, let's go on. Item 2, discussion of the comprehension plan. Mr. Peterson?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Robert Peterson for staff. The purpose of this presentation today is to give you some background on a comprehensive plan amendment that will be coming to you in the very near future for transmittal. And then after the review and comment period by the state of Florida, it would come back to you for an adoption hearing. And the reason we wanted to do this is, as Russell pointed out, this is a large plan amendment, and the genesis of this dates back to 2006 when the city annexed this property. Under state law, when the city annexes property from the unincorporated jurisdiction, it retains, in this case, the Lee County land use and zoning until such time as city land use and zoning are in place. I think there's a reasonable expectation that occurs in a somewhat expeditious time frame, and 14 years might be stretching that a bit. It might even be a record, but at this point, when this project ultimately gets land use on the map, there will only be one other piece currently in Cape Coral that doesn't have city land use and zoning. It's not me, I promise. So some facts and figures. It's part of the Zemmel properties. It's a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment, a little over 1,200 acres in north central Cape Coral. The requested classifications under the future land use amendment would allow up to 2,515 single-family homes and 1,330 multi-family homes. The maximum densities allowed under those comp plan designations, which equates to about 9,700 residents under the U.S. Census formula of 2.57 persons per household in Cape Coral. That number is likely to change with the census this year, but that's the current number. The existing wetland areas on the property would be placed in open space, and no additional commercial office or mixed use is part of this amendment. Again, as was pointed out, an adjacent site to the west under common ownership has 255 acres of an existing mixed-use future land use category that could allow for a whole variety of non-residential uses. This is a land use amendment only. Zoning and development plans would follow in the future, and we do want to make the council aware there are some significant infrastructure issues for any plan amendment of this size, and mostly utilities, as we'll discuss in a little bit. Water and sewer service will be required for any density above 2 dwelling units per acre under state law. This property is not part of the Cape Coral subdivision, which has the exemption for quarter-acre parcels to be on well and septic, because it wasn't part of the original Cape Coral plat. The site is currently in the Urban Services Reserve Area, reflecting the absence of utilities. And a comprehensive plan amendment would be required in the future to designate this property as Urban Services Transition Area. This will require specific plans for the extension and financing of water and sewer, in this case most likely to be developer funded. And the reason for that is the extension of water and sewers is likely 10 years in the future unless developer funded. And Mr. Pearson could speak more to that if you'd like. So this land use amendment, the implementation of that, of course, is through your zoning and development plans, and that would happen in future once those details are wrapped down. The Zemmel properties, as they're known in North Cape Coral, there's 3 parts. The blue part over on the right-hand side of this slide, Zemmel East, adjacent to 41. The Zemmel Central, which we're talking about today in yellow, and the Zemmel West in the red area. This time frame goes back to the middle 2000s when the city was approached about an annexation. City ultimately adopted the annexation ordinance. It was challenged by Lee County. That challenge was ultimately denied, and the state approved the annexation, and we move forward in time. And as noted earlier, that property immediately to the west has got a mixed-use preserve on 255 acres. GA Pinnacle purchased these properties in 2013, the central and west parcels, and there's some details there about the parts that already have land use in place. And last year they submitted this an amendment for the Zemmel Central, which they're calling Hudson Creek. And on this aerial overlay with a shadow in red shows you the extent of the GA Pinnacle ownership at this point in time. And the comp plan amendment area is just a little bit smaller area, is outlined in red, the subject parcels. The proposed changes are, first of all, in where you see the number 1, that is to the 53 acres to single-family multifamily. The 2, the darker yellow shade, is the 571 acres to single family, and the number 3, there are a few places on the map in the greenish shade, would be the 613 acres to be open space. The applicant received a conditional utility letter from the city, which estimated 3,138 residential units, which translates into 627,600 gallons per day of water and sewer needs to serve this site. The city identified in the letter that we have adequate treatment plant capacity to provide that amount of treatment through a developer-funded extension. And the letter is not a commitment to serve, only an acknowledgement that we do have adequate treatment plant capacity for this site. And the letter advised that a utility study would take place and the Hudson Creek property was would be considered for a future UEP project. As we noted before, the city-provided utilities are not likely in the near future, as the area is several miles away from the nearest city utility lines, and we have some maps to show that for you. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat this afternoon. As noted, the densities would require water and sewer, and the comp plan amendment would be required to place this in the urban services transition area. And the site is north and east of UEP North 7, and per the Florida code, without having utilities there, homes on wells and septics require a minimum 1/2 acre lot size. And according to the Utilities Department, a timeline for provision of municipal utilities for this area will be evaluated under the Utilities Master Plan update, which is currently underway. And specific development plans and zoning for this site may not be appropriate until those plans are finalized and the provisions for extending those utilities by the developer or owner are known. The closest UEP area is a little over 2 miles away as the crow flies, to the south or to the east. And this shows the proximity a little over 1 mile away to the North RO plant, where there are water lines but no sewer at this time. There's also some utility lines, as you know, coming down Burnt Store Road from Charlotte County that were constructed as a part of an interlocal agreement with Charlotte County and the RV resort property that's outlined in sort of the reddish tone there, where the arrow is pointing. And those lines have a capacity of 100,000 gallons per day. And Tranquility Lakes is estimate is going to use 50,000 gallons of sewer and about 60,000, of water, and about 60,000 gallons per day of sewer, leaving 49,600 gallons of water remaining and 40,200 gallons of sewer remaining. Additional water and sewer capacity may not be available from Charlotte County that could be upsized to the extent it would be needed for this project. Our comprehensive plan concurrency standards have 200 gallons per day each of water and sewer for single-family homes. The Charlotte lines, based on the existing commitments, could serve about 201 additional single-family homes based on the remaining capacity, and they may not have capacity to provide more output to send our way. So that if that doesn't work out, it would need to be extension of city utilities. There's also a road network questions. The surrounding road network consists of Burnt Store Road, El Dorado Boulevard, Chiquita, Wilmington, Jacaranda, and Nelson Road, and that 255-acre parcel at the left-hand side or the west side of this picture has frontage on Burnt Store Road. So that network we have the facts about the lanes projected for the future needs. And there may need to be upgrades for a project of this size, and that would be determined at the actual stage of development plans when a specific traffic study comes online. So that might not be known at the comp plan amendment stage, and that's often a question we get, so we want to identify that information for you. There may be additional infrastructure needs in the future for police and fire, schools, and again, the detailed review of those will come at the time of a rezone or specific development plans for the site. With respect to commercial, we received a comment that, well, shouldn't there be more commercial potentially looked at on this site? So we put together just a quick positive and negative on commercial and residential. This is a very large site, over 1,200 acres. It is in common ownership. There are multiple potential access points, and a commercial tax base would certainly help that relationship of residential and commercial in the city. And there is 255 acres of existing mixed use adjacent to the west that could be commercial or residential or both. The majority of this site lacks frontage on a major arterial, so there's no visibility that commercial uses look for. There are no nearby commercial nodes, and it would require new road infrastructure. And commercial development often can require more water and sewer capacity than residential uses, depending on what those uses may be and the extent that the site is developed. And the wetlands that are scattered throughout the site is sort of not a cohesive pattern. They're scattered here and there throughout the site. Could make development challenging in terms of that 1,200 acres. Sounds like a huge piece of property, but there's pieces and parts all around. On the residential side, the residential uses proposed could provide an excellent base for the nearby commercial land on Burnt Store Road, lower demand on roads and utilities than commercial uses, less impact on surrounding preservation areas, and more compatible with some of the surrounding area that's very low density or undeveloped, or is residential primarily to the south. The downside of that, loss of potential commercial land. There's an existing abundance of residential lots. Over 43,750 lots exist in the city today. You could pull a permit to build a home on without any comp plan amendments, rezones, or subdivisions. And the utility provision schedule is unknown, and the net loss of taxes for services unless you're at a certain price point for residential. So in conclusion, we have an abundance of single-family development as it is today. There's ample space for single-family residential, including an abundance in northeast Cape Coral. The annexation agreements acknowledged that there were obstacles for commercial development, and that was 14 years ago, within the interior annexation areas, Zemel Central, and the Zemel West may fulfill the future commercial needs for a large segment of this area. The site lacks characteristics of attractive commercial land, frontage, visibility, etc., and future zoning and development will require specific plans for developer-funded water and sewer. We wanted to bring this again to your information because it's a very large comp plan amendment, and some of the history stretches back over many years, so we kind of wanted to bring it all together. And certainly the land use portion of it is separate and distinct from the zoning and development plans in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I've only got one question. The other one got answered further down the road there. Sewage. We have 2 sewer plants in the city, one in the Southwest Cape and one at Everest. Can they, between them, handle this additional, or are we going to have to put up another sewer plant somewhere?
Jeff Pearson, Utilities Director. Council member, we have a lot of sewer capacity right now that we previously invested in at the 2 plants when they were upgraded back in the early 2000s. Right now, we're like right under 50%. We have about 28.4 million gallons a day of capacity. And we're only using about 13, so we have plenty of capacity. We are, like with North 1 and North 2, we're moving that wastewater south of Pine Island Road to the 2 plants where we have sitting on all that capacity. In the future, probably 20 to 30 years out, we have plans to build a 3rd wastewater plant next to the North RO plant. We already have the land. It was acquired before the North RO plant was constructed, and we have conceptual layouts of where that plant's going to go.
All right, so by adding a whole bunch of single-family homes up there, that is not going to trigger the 3rd plant?
No, sir. It would not. It's not even 1 million gallons.
Okay.
And we're sitting on about 15, so we're in real good shape.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Gunter?
Thank you, Mayor. Before I express my comments, I'd like to hear from our economic development manager regarding this area and see if you have any concerns or any recommendations regarding this parcel.
So good evening, Ricardo Noguera, Economic Development Manager. I've actually been traveling Burnt Store Road, north of Pine Island Road for the past several months. I'm viewing that corridor as the future of economic development in the city. We have the largest parcels up there that can support economic development. And I know when I had spoken to Jeff and we talked about when the water and utility lines would be available. 10 years plus is a long time. And you have a 300-acre site that the city owns just north of Kismet on the west side of Burnt Store Road. You have the Gator Slough site, 140 acres just south of there on the east side of Burnt Store Road. You have the Gates properties, a couple hundred acres across from the Myriad Motor Coach site. So you're talking 600 plus acres that could be available and accessible to Charlotte County and I-75 through Burnt Store Road. And then you have these Zemo properties. I think the city needs to, and I'm sort of caught in a weird situation, but I think the city needs to, the single-family residential is, when I look at that area from Burnt Store Road and I go east to Del Prado, there's a lot of fill-in sites south of Wilmington between Pine Island Road and Wilmington that could keep private builders busy for the next several years. I go down Diplomat, I go down Kismet, I go down these north-south corridors along Santa Barbara. There's a lot of fill-in sites. So do we need to move forward with a major subdivision north of Wilmington now? I would say fill in those sites south of Wilmington first. And there are opportunities with the attraction, if we are going to look at anything, is getting water and sewer up Burnt Store Road. And I know Jeff has said we need more rooftops, we need more development in order for water and sewer to work north of Pine Island Road along Burnt Store Road. But I'll tell you, other than a few large sites we have in the Northeast, like the former Academic Village site that we're working on, there are very few commercial light industrial sites available where we can do a business park, an office park in the city, other than what you have along Burnt Store Road.
Thank you. You know, when I take a look at that, can we put the map up that shows the colors? One thing that's a little concerning to me is the 255 acre parcel that runs next to Burnt Store. In my opinion, that screams out commercial. So if we were going to have any type of a overall land change use on this whole property, I think we have to look at it in its entirety and not just a small segment to make sure that at a minimum, at least that parcel stays commercial.
I'm getting to that slide, I apologize.
The other item I wanted to bring up was, just like several months ago, you know, we had talked about RML, residential multi-low density, and RMM, which is medium density. And when we were looking at the land use, before we changed it, we decided, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of the residential multifamily units in the city was going to be designated as RML, and then site-specific, the developer would have to come to council or to come back to the city to get it changed to RMM. Is that correct? And is that how we would approach this site? Because I noticed in your presentation, it went directly to 25 units per acre, which is our RMM classification.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gunter, let me answer your questions in sequence. On the screen, you'll see the actual comp plan amendment area as outlined in the blue. The existing mixed use, the 255 acres, is the parcel that's adjacent to Burnt Store Road. That's not part of this amendment that's coming forward. That was done previously. So in that mixed-use future land use category, you can have commercial zoning, you could have industrial zoning, and you could have a mix of land uses as well. So that and get that frontage on Burnt Store, I think would be most attractive for commercial rather than residential. That is a big piece, 255 acres. It could be the eastern extent of that, up adjacent to that sort of what I describe as a flowway or the wetland system that sort of divides these properties. Maybe ultimately be more suited for residential. I think that will emerge over time. We'll know that. The answer to your second question is the future land use category, be it multifamily or single family, multifamily, under the comp plan allows up to 25 units per acre. That's what the land use allows. In this case, the request is not to RML or RMM because there's no zoning at this time. I think you heard Russell state, and that's our understanding as well, that the development would proceed forward under a planned unit development rather than a request for a straight rezone to RMM. You are correct that at the time of adoption of the maps, along with the code, all the RMM was removed from the maps and it was all designated RML. We have at least one application in that came in very recently that's proceeding forward to rezone a specific site from RML to RMM to utilize that higher density, and they're doing that as a straight rezone, not as a planned development.
And so what you're basically saying, if I understand you correctly, the existing 255-acre parcel is pretty much taken out of this request at this time.
Is not part of this request.
But what I'm trying to say is before I would entertain approving the overall picture of this, I think we need to look at the big picture. I would feel more comfortable if we incorporated the 255 acres and make sure that's commercial. I understand the other areas, it looks like it's more feasible for single family or multifamily, but I think this area is solely, the best use for this would be commercial in that area. So that would be my suggestion that I would be looking forward, moving forward with that 255 acres be a part of this package if we were going to consider it, making sure that that area stayed commercial.
We'll be happy to share, I'm sure the applicant's hearing this, we'll be happy to share that with the applicant to see if they want to pursue a change on that parcel as well.
All right. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Peterson if we, as staff, would be allowed to recommend and pursue that modification as something that would be in addition to the original application.
It gets a little dicey at this part. You have an application, it's already been reviewed, it's been through the Planning and Zoning Commission, it's up to you for transmittal. So the applicant may or may not want to hit the pause button to add that land in and change it. The genesis for this amendment is to bring this under the Cape Coral Comprehensive Plan. The City Council, by its own motion, could initiate a comp plan amendment for that property, should you choose to do so. Or the city could initiate a change, but we're reluctant to do so if the property owner isn't on board with that. The council could initiate it if they chose to.
Well, my understanding, I guess the reason that we're here today is you're trying to get a sense of direction from council, and that's why we're here today talking about that.
Mr. Gunter, as manager, I would not be reluctant to initiate a change to have 255 acres be solidified as commercial mixed use if I had a sense of direction from this body to do so. If that's within our authority, we'll include that. And you're right, this is the reason that we're having this discussion.
Right. So that's just my my concerns and my point of view. And since you're asking for a sense of direction, that would be the direction I would like to see us move forward in. Thank you.
You know, I think it's important because when you look at the residential development that would take place up there, certainly you would need amenities to go along with that size of a development, whether it be commercial like Publix or, you know, Walgreens or strip mall or whatever would be supporting of the community that would be built. You're looking at quite a bit, so I think it's essential that that's included as part of this package going forward. I concur with Councilmember Gunter Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely agree with our economic development manager. He hit the nail on the head about Burnt Store Road. I've been complaining about this since the day I first took office in 2013. For Burnt Store Road not to have utilities is ludicrous. I know it's one of these chicken and the egg situations. I keep being told, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, nobody's ever going to pay for it if we don't get it up there and get people in there that can. It's a huge area up there for development, and I think it's time we just have to drive a stake and make a decision what's going to happen here. Same with the Zemo property in the middle. I've always advocated sending utilities up the main roads going up to that area, which would be Burnt Store Road, Chiquita, El Dorado, Santa Barbara. Maybe we can't do it on all the roads, and I'm just talking about running the main lines, get it up there. But we certainly should be able to do something on Burnt Store Road. We should have done it when they had it all dug up. They did put in pipes under the crossroads so they could run the pipes through. Would have been so much easier just to put the pipes in. But anyway, I would like the council to agree to ask staff to come back with a plan, because they can't do anything till we okay it, with a plan to run utilities up the road. They're going to have to engineer it and present it like any other section they're doing. And I think we need to start moving forward on this. It's you know, we had to ask Charlotte County to bail us out with the RV resort and run pipes down the road. So I'm asking the council to agree to instruct staff to work on a plan to bring back to us as soon as possible on getting the sewers, water, and irrigation up Burnt Store Road so we can start building our commercial base. Because right now, that's his biggest impediment, our utilities. And until we get utilities, we're not going to get anything. So that's what I want to say. So
Mr.
the
City
council will
Manager?
go along with it.
Mr.
Thank you.
Zerlak?
Thank you. Mr. Williams, I think that what you're asking for could be viewed as an extension of what Councilmember Gunter and Mayor Coviello had
Right.
supported. And so if you would agree to include existing mixed use of 255 acres into our next step for a comp plan amendment, we can certainly have staff look at the cost to run up infrastructure up Burnt Store Road. It's also my understanding that the water and sewer and irrigation lines would not require us to tear up a new road. They would be on either side.
Okay, no, that's fine, because we have property on both sides of the road that can be developed.
Well, I think-
They don't have to run the lines into the neighborhoods. They can stub it off,
Understood.
run it up there.
I think part of that issue is the fact that typically when we expand the utilities, whether it be sewer or water, it's through assessments to the residents
Yes.
that we're bringing it to. When you start running mains up Burnt Store Road or any other major artery, the funds have to be identified, and how does it get paid for?
Right.
So I think it would be great to come back and at least see what the cost would be and whether it's even feasible to consider that type of a project going forward and how it would be paid for.
We can do that, sir, but I think that it's also independent, if there's a general sense of direction, to include the 255 acres of mixed use moving forward.
Madam City Attorney?
Thank you. Excuse me. So my understanding is, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but that although often, many times, staff brings issues to you for CAL meetings to get general direction, because this is not a city-initiated land use change, it's rather an owner-initiated land use change. I think staff more had this on your agenda today to introduce you to it as something that, as an application for a land use change, a comprehensive plan change that you are going to be seeing in the near future. To the extent that suggestions are, if that is correct, if I'm mistaken, then I'm mistaken, and I'm sure staff will tell me. But if I'm not mistaken, then the only way to start combining that with other proposed changes would be with the, to discuss that with the applicant and have the applicant agree that somehow the applicant wants to see this become part of possibly a larger a larger change. I'm not here talking about the utility extension. I'm more talking back to the question that Councilmember Gunter raised a minute ago about possibly changing some more land, if I understood that. So am I stating that correctly, staff?
My understanding would be that, again, I'm speaking as manager, I would not have a discomfort if I have a general sense of direction to, if I'm legally allowed to, include an amendment to the application submitted by the property owner to include 255 acres of commercial mixed use, if we're allowed to. Being here a while, I've already seen one example where council had approved a residential area, and I believe they wanted, and there was also a request at that time for commercial frontage. Because of normally short-term, candidly and normally because of short-term solutions for developers and builders, residential market's hot right now. You want to go toward residential. If you want to look at the next 30 to 50 years, if you could tie bar these things together, I think that would make it a lot easier. Otherwise, you risk having the residential approved, perhaps, and then at some future point, if you don't expedite the existing mixed use and wait for a developer to say, well, I want to make it commercial now. If there's still a hot market for residential, you may come back at some future point in the near, not too far out in the future, asking for more residential. So, again, if we're allowed to as staff, we'd like to include 255 acres as commercial mixed use.
Well, can I ask, the property owner has representation here. Would you come up and ask and answer the question whether that's even something that would be considered? I think that'll help us.
For your record, Russell Schropp, representing the applicant. And yes, we'd be happy to meet with staff and to discuss the possibilities. The reality is the orange parcel that's on your screen right there is already shown as mixed use on your comprehensive plan, so it really doesn't need to be incorporated into the plan. What we need to do is an overall PUD application that would include commercial and mixed use on the orange as well as residential on the remainder, and that's the direction we're heading, and we'd like to get there, but we need to get the comp plan amendment moving first before we follow up with the PUD. But yes, we're happy to discuss with staff and come back and try and move in the direction that you all would like to go.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry? No, Madam City Attorney had the floor, and I've got Gunter's light next. Councilman Gunter.
So the only thing I want to, did you say that I had the floor?
You did have the floor.
Okay. So the only thing I want to add is, yes, so that's exactly what I said. For this to be added into the applicant's application, then that's going to happen with the consent of the applicant. If we want to do a second one, one in addition to the applicant's, and time that one appropriately, then I think that we would be able to do that, certainly as a city and staff initiated land use change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gunter?
Thank you. It sounds like that, all parties are willing to sit down and try to come up with a good formula moving forward that'll appease everybody. I think one of the concerns that we have as council, at least I know I do, is we have a 92 to 8% tax base ratio for residential here in city of Cape Coral. So I think many times that all of us have a desire to increase that commercial tax base. That's what our goal is. So we have no problems with a residential tax base. We pull over 200 residential permits a month. So I think we just want to make sure that we're protecting whatever land is out there that we could utilize for commercial use. And just like the mayor said, with that amount of residential improvements in that area, you're going to have some commercial use to coincide with that influx of residential growth. Lastly, as far as the, since Councilmember Williams mentioned it, as far as future utility expansion projects, I know we're coming up with a master plan right now. We're looking at that. I agree wholeheartedly. Again, our goal, I think, should be to make sure that we put water and sewer towards areas that we could increase that commercial tax base. What we have done in the past, historically, you can tell it hasn't been working because that tax base, I think the best I've seen it go up is about a 90-10 ratio, and I think we're back down to a 92 to 8. So we're going to have to do something different compared to what we've been doing, if that's what our goal is. I think I've heard everyone say that's what our objective is. So we have to decide what we're going to have to do to get there. And one of those things is look at where there's commercial property up in the north, what has the most commercial property, and get those utility to those areas. Because I'll tell you, and I'm sure our economic development manager will attest to this, if water and sewer isn't there, the developers won't come. So you're almost at a point where you have to put it in and they will come. And I know that has some obstacles in itself as far as getting the system to work properly, but we need to try to do that moving forward. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Welsh?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councilmember Gunter and with yourself, Mr. Mayor, that this really needs to be part of the overall process, keeping this as commercial. And then I also feel like we need to talk about the utility expansion as a separate issue and continue on with this one. And maybe we talk again about utility expansion, but really just off the cuff and maybe a little bit ridiculous is, I don't know how deep the developers' pockets are, but perhaps they would fund the expansion with the possibility of being reimbursed over time as more commercial people join them, that they get their money back from other people who then tap into the system. That's all I have.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Welch. These are two separate issues. But the reason I brought it up is at some point we have to address this situation. I have a question for the city attorney. Is there any reason that we can't charge the assessments to the adjoining property owners, to say on Burnt Store Road, upon the sale of that property, when they sell it to a developer, then as part of that, the assessments could be paid at that point? Instead of trying to get somebody to pay ahead? Well, nobody's going to pay ahead because nobody needs them right now, unless the current landowners and owner for investment want to put that kind of money into it. But can they be charged for the assessment on the transfer of the property versus beforehand? Of course, they won't get the discounts or anything.
I think the question you're asking is really a broader, more complicated question that would be better addressed individually when we're talking about that issue, about the expansion of utilities in areas where there aren't any, and how much of that can be developer funded, and in what ways, because I think the word assessment is even possibly not exactly the correct term to be using. But so I think there are different ways that utilities get extended to areas where there aren't any, and sometimes developers do bear some of the initial costs in doing that under various circumstances. One thing I wanted to allude to, though, and the reason my light was flashing, is because the owner, or the owner's representative, made reference to possibly this needing to be in a PUD. That point is well taken. Bear in mind, however, that the PUD will be implementing the land use. So it is not the same as the land use change, and it is not in place of the land use change. It would be a planned unit development to implement the land use designation after it's placed on the property. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's helpful, because that's always the excuse whenever I bring this up, is who's going to pay for it? Well, somebody, until we get somebody there won't be anybody to pay for it. All right, that's all my questions. I am going to state that I am not going to vote yes for any development up there until the utilities are there or in process, personally. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So I guess the sense of direction is to look at combining the residential alongside with the commercial, and then to also get back some information regarding, as a separate issue, running the utilities up Burnt Store Road.
That's the way I understand it, too.
Yeah, that's what the recommendation I was going to make as well. I think this probably could be a topic solely at a future Cal meeting. Once the overall utility expansion project that you're now taking a look at, which direction you want to go, once you've kind of developed a plan, I'd like to see staff bring that plan back to us so we can take a look at it.
Of course.
And additionally, I'd like to see Economic Development Manager put a map together that shows where these large parcels of commercial properties are north of Pine Island Road. So we can look at the two where we have a good understanding of where these parcels are located and how we can move forward to try to get these parcels developed. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Got a sense of direction?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ehrlich?
I do.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go on to item 3, update resolution 129-18, D&D boat ramp.
Say, do you want to hook me up here? Okay. On the boat ramp?
And Mike, you got this one loaded up?
I'll be a minute, Mike.
Sure.
Or Paul, for both of you. Yeah, okay. I'll be a minute. And where Mike? I've got a very short executive summary. Mr. Ilchism and Mr. Klingon have a not-so-short presentation summary. But our objective, I'm going to essentially go backwards. We're looking for a general sense of direction on how to proceed with this parcel. Do you want to make it, continue to make it part of our quality of life by maintaining the boat ramps and have an enhancement? Do you wish to include a restaurant as well? Or do you wish to sell the parcel? And that's essentially what we're asking for with the presentation that you're going to be seeing. Hopefully it'll answer all your questions. We never want to force you into making a decision, so that if you don't have a zone of comfort and you have questions we cannot answer, we'll be happy to answer them and then get back to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike Ilchism, Senior Manager in Public Works. I'm just going to go over the kind of the presentation outline, and then we'll go through the presentation. So the D&D property has been used for 40 years with a boat ramp and an unimproved parking lot. A few years ago, council approved a new boat ramp design that we used to submit for some competitive grants with the federal Florida Boating Improvement Program. That also included directing staff to look and seek for a P3 that would help fund the improvements on the property. There's 12 saltwater access boat lanes and 5 different ramps if we include the D&D. The city needs 28 lanes of saltwater access at full build-out to service the entire population. A limiting factor on saltwater access is the Manatee Protection Plan. D&D property is grandfathered 64 slips. Without grandfathering, it would only be worth 17. Based on the 2018 appraisal, if we had to replace those 64 slips outside of D&D at the value that D&D was appraised at, we would need about $13.5 million to buy replacement property. Finding enough property to purchase waterfront slips of 64 without condemnation is likely minimal. And as a result of that, putting together the comp plan and the grants that we already have in previous direction through Resolution 129-18, it's management recommendation to retain the property for boat ramp and park. We're going to go through the existing use on the property's history, a development code summary, our comprehensive plan analysis, our existing boat ramp that we have in the city, how many we need, the conceptual site plans that are out there related to what we want to do on the site, look at that $13.5 million and consider what we would consider a highest and best use consideration, and then talk about the grants that we have. So in 2002, the city did purchase, as part of the 491 purchase, properties along Pine Island Road. The amount of money that was associated with those specific properties in that $13+ million purchase was $2.3 million. The uses on that property are a bait and tackle shop, boat ramps, finger piers, vehicle and trailer parking lot, and a fishing shore. This is an image from 1972. You can see that the two buildings are there. There is one of the kind of the boat ramp areas here, and then there's a boat ramp area here. You can see this is before the spreader was even built. So this just gives you kind of a history that it's been operating in Matlacha and Pine Island under a similar use since then. And it hasn't always been D&D, but it, same use. And then here it is in 2016. Again, boat ramp here and boat ramp here. Fishing shoreline along here and all along this edge. Bait and tackle shop in the left-hand corner with boat storage and finger piers. So the property summary is it's 4.5 acres. It has a Lee County future land use of urban community. The density would be allowed would be 10 units per acre. It has this, within the portions of land, there is a C1A and a C2. There would be a maximum height of 35 feet and a maximum lot coverage of 40%. To break out the C1 and C2, these are the portions of property that would have a C2 zoning, and this is the C1 zoning. Examples of development that are permitted within the C1 and C2, you could have in the C2 automotive repair and service. In C1 and the C2, you're allowed boat ramp and boat ramp rentals, self-service fuel sales. There has been, and you'll see later on in one of our plans, we were looking at improving with a fuel sale. You could have a department store. You could have an oil and gas excavation company that does need to go through that special exception. Hotels, motels, restaurants, supermarket, and then you could also have residential single-family duplexes within the C1 and the C2. So these are just kind of a listing of things that are permitted currently, and the two that the city would like to continue there are allowable under the existing Lee County codes. Our comprehensive plan, in policy 1.2, we have a recreation and open space element that defines our boat ramp level of service. In order to service a certain amount of population in the community, we require one saltwater boat ramp lane per 10,000 residents. And this does take into account the fact that we do have all the properties on salt water. So a lot of people like to think since we have access to the salt water, we don't need a lot of boat ramps, but this is for all the people that are off water, and for those people that do live on water, when they do need to service their boat or purchase their boat, they need to be able to launch and recover that, and you need to do that without congregating all those people at one ramp throughout the city. So that's why there's a need for the boat ramps in the comprehensive plan. In our 2019 BEBR estimate, we're at about 185,000, which would indicate we should have around 19 saltwater boat ramps. At our build-out population of around 400,000, we would need about 40. Our current level of service is 10 saltwater access lanes in 4 locations. If you include the D&D, we're at 12 and 5. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to continue to move forward with the 12 lanes and the 5. You'll see that discussed, and we'll break that out later. So our projected deficiency at build-out is going to be 30 lanes currently. That would be what we'd be needing to purchase in our Parks and Rec inventory, or 28 with the D&D property. The existing city boat ramps the city has, so again, we're going to stick with having D&D in the system. There's 3 on the Caloosahatchee River. That's Rosen, which is kind of in the northeast, off of 24th, Horton, off of Everest, and then the Yacht Club. There's one in the northwest Cape Coral Canal system, which is the Burnstore boat ramp, and then we have this one just outside the city limits in Matlacha, which is the D&D boat ramp. Comparatively, we have 11 freshwater access ramps. So we have 6 inside the southeast and 5 in the northwest. So from a boating access level of service, right now the city is offering to its residents a higher level of service in the freshwater systems than we are in the saltwater systems. This is kind of an aerial layout. If you see the 3 that are in the southeast portion, that kind of spreads out the use so that there's different areas of access into the southeast. And then you see the 2 in the northwest, one being the D&D Matlacha, and then the other one being the Burnstore boat ramp. Within the existing boat ramps, we have 203 trailer boat parking spaces. And this is going to be important because I need to talk about slips, and I'll further break that down in the next slide. In the Manatee Protection Plan, which kind of limits the access to the water in order to protect the West Indian manatee, waterfront property is only allowed so many boating slips per linear foot of waterfront edge. And those slips can be defined as a wet slip, so in water storage, a dry slip in a like a storage unit, or a trailer boat parking at a launch. So all three of those are synonymous when it comes to the Manatee Protection Plan. So in this case, if there's 64 slips at D&D, you could put all 64 in the water, you could put all 64 in a dry storage, you can put all 64 on the land in a boat trailer parking, or you can do some combination of those three. So looking at the 203 that we currently have throughout the city, a third of them right now is sitting at D&D. So if we were to lose this, we would lose 1/3 of the saltwater boating access that we have in the city of Cape Coral. That in itself is a big financial headwind for us, in that this property, when we did purchase it, came with that many slips. And they came with that because it was grandfathered under the Manatee Protection Plan. When that plan went into place, they had to do an existing evaluation of all of the access to the water, and those were grandfathered in, and then they limited any future development along the water from there. This kind of breaks out where we have the slips and where we have the launch lanes. So we have at Rosen, we have 4 lanes, 56 parking spaces. Again, that would be considered a slip. At Horton, we have 2 launch lanes with 32 trailer parking spaces. And in the Yacht Club, we have 2 launch lanes and 31, for a total of 119 slips in the southeast. In the northwest, we have 2 at Burnstore with 20 slips or parking spaces at Burnstore. At D&D, we have 2 and 64. So just that kind of snapshot, you can see how valuable those 64 slips are in comparison to all the other inventory or access that the city has in our existing current inventory of boat ramps. This was a slide that we used when we got council's permission to submit for a competitive grant in order to compete to improve the boat ramp. This happened between February 2015, February 2016. We were gathering data in order to compete with the grant. And when we looked at the Yacht Club, Horton, Rosen, and Burnstore, and then compared the usage to D&D, almost half of the launches that were occurring in that year occurred at D&D. This does not include annual passes, so this is actual just tickets for paying customers at those locations. There's a lot of requests that frequently come in to try and open up D&D to the annual pass holder, so we're pretty confident that excluding them in both sets of data kind of shows a fair picture, because if we were to open up D&D, then we probably get even more traffic shifting over there, because as you heard tonight, there's a lot of people who want to have that included in the annual pass inventory. Right now it's not. We do collect the $10 and we get a revenue share from every one of those launches. A little busy here, but I'm going to walk through this. The solid lines that run across the screen are the actual annual averages that occur at those ramps. So I'll start with the top one. The annual average that occurred from March 14 through March 16 is 380 on average, 388 launches per month. The Yacht Club is sitting at 228 launches a month, Horton at 138 a month, Rosen at 167, and Burnstore at 123. Those lines are there, and the jagged line actually shows you the month-to-month use at the D&D boat ramp, and there's 2 points here that I want you to focus on. The first one is that red circle on the left, which says 388. Over that 2-year time span at the D&D boat ramp, there was the lowest usage at D&D was 388 launches. That in itself was still 1.7 times greater than the average at the yacht club. The average at the yacht club is 228. In this case, it was 388. The highest use in those 2 years that were tracked was 865 launches, which happened in June of 2015. And when you combine all of the other ramps together, those didn't even equal the amount of usage in that same month. So in our highest month at D&D, we're using more than all of the other inventory in the system. And in the lowest usage at D&D, we're still using 1.7 times more than what's being seen at the yacht club. We use this data to show the Florida Boating Improvement, FWC, that improving this ramp meant a lot to our community, and we had the data to support how much it was used, and as a result of that, we were successful in obtaining that grant. But I'm using this data today to only reiterate to you, we used this back in 2016 when we applied, and it shows the amount of people that are using that ramp. So in 2016, in addition to this, council adopted the Parks Master Plan. That plan outlined the need for future boat ramps. Within that master plan, there were surveys taken for the residents that listed water access as one of the top priorities in that plan. We don't have in the south of Pine Island Road, we don't have any properties large enough to support a ramp of this size. And in the northwest, we would only be looking at Seven Islands, Tropicana Park, and Serenia Vista as an alternative to this, but those push the ramp usage further up into the canal system, and we may not be able to get 64 slips in those, so we might end up having if the decision is to get rid of this, we might end up having to put a boat ramp at all 3 of those sites and still not get the same 64 slips access due to the amount of waterfront that we would make available. So the conceptual plan that we had brought forward that City Council approved previously took those boat slips and put 44 of them into boat trailer parking, and we reserved 20 in water for the potential P3 and wet water slips for rentals depending on how the P3 were to have worked out. We were adding a restaurant, a fuel dock, and retaining the bait and tackle shop because that also was a directive of council, was to make sure that we retain D&D. We were relocating the 2 boat lanes to a more safer launching and recovery area. And as a part of that, we were also providing public safety docks and lifts for police and fire in the Northwest, because right now they currently have nothing. So when everybody keeps talking about we need increased public safety in the Northwest, right now all of that is coming from the yacht club. So every time they need to go to the Northwest and service that Northwest spreader, they're coming all the way around the Horn, all the way up through Matlacha Pass and into there, or they're trailering boats from the yacht club all the way to D&D or the Burnstone boat ramp. So part of the plan that we were doing was going to be putting public safety boats in the Northwest for the future growth and monitoring of the Northwest. This was a look at the plan that the City Council had seen. This was a result of some safety analysis that the city had done. If you remember when we first came forward, the Northwest Neighborhood Association brought some concerns about this being a blind curve, and also the velocity of the channel during certain tide events. So we did an analysis with Coastal Engineering. We were able to come up with this alternative design that relocated the boat ramp kind of back into like a little safe harbor area, and basically eliminate having boats launching right now as they do into the main channel. This had a P3 kind of on the bottom left, and then had the bait and tackle shop over by the boat ramp. Another design came out after that as a result of the P3. When we went out for the RFP for the P3, we had a restaurateur come in and say, you know, the view here really is out on the point. You know, the people that want to come here are probably going to want to look north up the spreader and west down the rim canal. So as a result of that, there was some shifting further of the boat ramp, kind of just continued it around so that you're still not launching into the main channel and you're still out of the current with the velocity. And so you see the P3 here shifted. The bait and tackle store is still near the boat lane launches, and then you have all the boat launch parking. This is the entire area over here is also part of the D&D property that would be used for stormwater if needed. This is kind of a look at the appraised value that we had and what it means to Parks and Rec if they had to replace the slips. So in 2018, there was an appraised value of $3.6 million. There are 64 manatee protection plan slips on the site. If you looked at those as purchasing that land just to get the water access at the price that it was appraised at, that would be about $56,000 per slip. I challenge anybody to go out and try and find a saltwater access lot for $56,000 today. It's not going to happen. So if we needed to replace the saltwater access property that we have with the amount of slips that were actually allowable today under the Manatee Protection Plan without the grandfathering, it would only be 17. So purchasing it at the appraised value, only getting 17 slips makes a slip worth $211,000 per slip. So if we had to go out and purchase 64 of those, the replacement cost for Parks and Rec would be over $13.5 million to try and buy this amount of land. It's 4 times more valuable than the fair market value that you would get in an appraisal. So from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, from a waterfront access, the fee simple interest here is way less than what it would be for us to try and get this amount of access for our residents moving forward. This kind of looks at if we were to basically cash out and we said, hey, let's retain the $2.35 million that was paid for this, we would wind up with $1.25 million in a cash out gain. At $13.5 million to replace this, if we said, hey, let's take our $1.25 million and run with it, that still leaves Parks with a deficit of $12.3 million. We do have a grant that's actively sitting on this parcel to improve it, to actually design the boat ramp improvements. It's a $67,500 grant to help assist with the funding of that. These improvements were going to sit over that entire property. Design and permitting of those were funded through what's called the Florida Boating Improvement Program, which is an FWC grant. We have not utilized that grant to date. We have worked with our parks neighborhood design team, AECOM. We have a contract that's prepared to amend theirs to fund the design of $303,000. $67,000 of it would be funded through the FBIP grant. Typically, it's 1 year from the expiration date. That grant is set to expire in March of 2020. I have asked for an extension through November, so if we get permission to continue moving forward that, we'd bring back the amendment, and then we would put that basically on the same exact timeline that we have for the neighborhood parks. So that would be, this would be finishing up design around the same time we have the other 7 neighborhood parks. We also know that the construction of the boat ramp and facilities is continued to be eligible for construction grants. We were very successful in competing for the FBIP design grant. Usually if you're eligible and are awarded a design grant, the same data you have can be used to be successful in competing for a construction grant. So we're very confident that we could compete for an FBIP construction grant. We also have a taxing district called West Coast Inland Navigation District. We did have a grant sitting on this property for them, but because of the new design that encumbered the entire property, the improvements we were going to do with that grant were no longer, they were basically became obsolete. So we returned that grant to WCIND so that we could show in good faith that when it comes time to build the larger park, you know, we didn't just use money and then, you know, demo it 2 years or 3 years later. So we're hoping that that is still available. Full design and approved permits are required before any construction grants. So as part of the AECOM amendment for them to design it, design and permitting is included in that contract amendment. Grants can fund up to 50% or more as long as we have a match. Our estimated cost of construction, if we were to do the full thing in its entirety at once and not do it in phases, would be $4 million, but certainly we can do boat launches, parking, seawalls. You can take them in chunks. You don't have to do the whole thing. And then if we do move forward with the design and we end up not doing the public boat ramp, we would have to refund the federal grant that we have or any other construction grant. So if we end up at some future date accepting grants, starting forward with the projects, and then selling at a later date, maybe not this council or a different council, then we would end up having to refund those grants. With that, we'll open it to any comments or questions.
Councilmember Gunter.
Thank you. First, thank you for the presentation. My question is, you and I have had meetings previously discussing relocating boat slips throughout the city at different facilities. One being the conversation that we were talking about was the yacht club area.
Correct.
Trying to take boat slips from other locations throughout the city and place them in areas that we would like to use them. Another example would be possibly Bemney Basin. If that ever, I think right now there's only about 15 slips allowed down there.
Yeah, it's slow.
And, you know, we could utilize some slips in that area as well. Will we be able to transfer these 64 slips that we've been talking about tonight to various other sites within the city? My understanding during our conversation, you said that could be completed working with the county.
Correct. Transferring of slips is permissible under the Lee County Manatee Protection Plan. I thought you might ask that question, so last week I sent an email to Lee County, and I was advised that they need to speak with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission about transferring grandfathered slips. So there's a little nuance related to transferring slips owned outright, like without the grandfathering, versus these 64.
Right. I think that's a huge question that we have to get answered. Because if we can transfer these slips and then sell the property, I'm in favor of selling the property. I realize that the slips are an asset to the city, so that was going to be my first question.
Yep. I foresaw, that's why I asked the question.
And I think that I personally would have to have that answer to be able to make a good informed decision or to change my mind not to sell the property. I think that if you take a look at this, I have to question, and maybe I'll ask the question, during your 2-year study from March of 2014 to March of 2016, do you have any additional data that shows how many residents were using that particular facility during that time period?
When we did the initial study that is monitored here, there was a time frame when we went through and the owners of D&D actually looked at that time frame, and back then it was about 70%, so that was what was on the original. We had asked them to do some more frequent, more recent monitoring, and that's what they said they did since Christmas, and now it's up to about 90. But there's a different demographic using the waterways now than over the time frame we had there.
Right. Well, like I said, I would have to get that one question because I think that's a very important question.
We did ask it. We're just awaiting a response on whether or not you could transfer grandfathered slips.
But not knowing that information right now, I would lean towards selling the property for a couple reasons. Number one, in one of our own diagrams, it showed that we were going to be removing an island to try to make that area safer.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. So in this plan that had the, moved it into like what we would consider like a little safe harbor, a lot of the concerns that came from the Northwest were related to the visibility in that turn. We were pretty confident that that is not. We looked at, I don't know if you were here when we had the report done, but we had no traffic crashes, no reportable issues with the police or the Lee County. But as part of this plan, we had discussed with the Army Corps of Engineers. We actually went for a pre-app meeting to the Army Corps of Engineers office, and we were told that that was accomplishable.
But the problem that I foresee is, like all the other problems that we've had in this area, is a fight from the residents of Matlacha. So my gut feeling tells me that we'll probably be in another fight if we're going to go in there and want to disturb the waterways. Here we have a lock in the southwest that we just want to remove, and we're in the middle of a fight of. So you you would think that if you're going to try to disturb the waterways, remove an island, I would venture to say we're going to be in another fight. I don't know if I'm willing to make that fight.
That's fine. I understand the point made. And that island that's there now, if you go back to the picture, just so you know, it's a spoil island of the actual canal itself. So if you notice here, the image, obviously there's no spreader, but then when you come over here, this actually is a spoil island from what was dug.
Right.
So it's not like a natural man-made, it was a man-made, and it actually does have about a 10-foot elevation, it's a hill of sand.
Right. The other issue that I have, if you take a look at this, and one of the reasons that I voted not to annex this property, I didn't think that they wanted us there. So I take that pretty seriously. So you don't want us there as an owner, but you want us to bring our checkbook and improve the area. If I'm in a business agreement, a joint venture with a business partner, and he tells me that I don't want your name on this property, but you can bring my checkbook and help me develop it, that's not going to set good with me. So my gut feeling at this point is to sell the property to another property owner, utilize that money. We don't know where we're going to be with the lock. There'll come a point in time where we may have to keep that lock. And I don't know if any of you have seen the estimates for the cost of replacing that lock, somewhere between $17 and $22 million. Where are we going to come up with that money? Well, we might have about $3 or $4 million sitting here. So we have to start thinking down the road, if we lose that challenge, it's going to be a pretty substantial hit to the residents of Cape Coral that we're going to have to. It's not if, it's when we're going to have to replace that. It's on a Band-Aid now. So we're going to have to start thinking about that. We're going to have to come up with that money somewhere, somehow. So if you look at the totality of all this, I can sympathize with D&D. I would hope that if we sold the property, that the new landowner would be able to work with you. And so you could stay there. The one person made a analogy about the one cow out of the 81. And I know where I'm from, there's a lot of farmers selling their property because the property's more value than whatever they're raising on that land. So we have to, as residents of Cape Coral, as council looks at the taxpayers' monies, I think we have to look at this very hard and see what the best thing is for the taxpayers. That's the decisions that we make, the 8 of us, what we feel is the best for the taxpayers. My opinion, the best decision for the taxpayers is to sell the property. That's where I stand. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Gunter, I agree with you. I've always advocating selling the property, especially now that Pine Island Civic has beat us up on the block and made us to keep it in. So we're going to have to find money to keep it maintained. This might be the resource to do that. If we transfer any of those 64 grandfathered slips, do we have to transfer parking with it? Is the parking?
So I'll explain the way that and this is an important discussion because it will be picked up if we do, it'll be picked up in the appraisal before you sell. So the way you transfer a slip is to actually go through an application process with Lee County. You identify the recipient site that you're going to look to transfer to. They do an analysis on that property to make sure that that site can accept the slips as part under the manatee protection plan, because remember, they're trying to save the manatee and provide better environments for the manatee. So you can't go transferring it from one area into a warm water congregation area that's going to increase the likelihood of accidents between manatees. So we would identify a recipient site, notify the county, get it on an evaluation criteria so they can make sure it's eligible to receive the slips. And if it is, what we would do is we would encumber this site. We would put a perpetual conservation easement over this site in perpetuity so that anybody that were to come and buy this would know that they do not have the ability to have the 64 slips. They're limited at whatever number is left on the parcel. In theory, if it was just 17 and it didn't have the grandfather and we know we can transfer, we could strip it all of its waterfront rights and basically deem it a landlocked parcel, but then that would come into play when if it does become surplus, that would get picked up on an appraisal and would be viewed negatively, and you'd probably lose value in the sale. So it's a balance that we, if we go that route, we just have to understand, one, the first question that Councilmember Gunter was asking, can we transfer? We're finding out if we can transfer the grandfathered slips. Two, where we would want to transfer them to. We've heard kind of two options. And then three, encumbering this site with the conservation easement that lets anybody know that they don't have the access that we would have had if we used it.
All right. On this slide that you have up now, D&D is on the left, and you can see a bunch of slips in that canal right there. They're in horrible condition. They're falling into the water right now. Were you looking at replacing those slips as part of this?
So at one point we were, under a West Coast Inland Navigation District, we were looking at improving the seawall and redoing the finger piers.
Okay.
When we got the grant for the $67,500 through the Florida Boating Improvement Program that actually went over the entire site, that was with that 1A plan that moved it over into this kind of safe harbor. And as a result of that, all those improvements were going to become obsolete. So we didn't want to spend that money and then have to return that money because we weren't using it. So we had planned on that, but we are not anymore because of the FBIP grant.
Where are you looking at putting the 64 slips if we don't transfer any?
So the plans that we have here basically have 44 upland trailer parking, and then kind of all along that canal, and then around the point for the restaurant would be reserved the slips for the restaurant. This is one of the things that in the discussions with the restaurateur that was asking and looking to develop this, they obviously want the waterfront access for their boating patrons to come and go in order to serve their restaurant. So we had a bulk of them as the boat and trailer, but then we had the others used for the restaurant outside of the main channel. So kind of from that point all the way around towards the boat ramp.
The canal that's running east to west, on the top of the piece of land there, has a fairly substantial current in it. And actually, the further you go to the left, the stronger it gets. By the time you get down to Maselli's, which is right by the border there, it's to the point where you can barely get into their slips. Your boats are just being pushed down the canal. I have no problem. I don't want to lose D&D. So we'll just put that in the yes column right now. I've been fighting this whole thing since the day you guys brought it up. I have no grief fixing the current boat ramp that D&D has. That's in an area that's negotiable. I mean, there are boats coming in and out of there all the time, but considering the condition of that ramp, a lot of times they're coming down the ramp are already headed in the direction they need to go on the canal. I think we should fix that. We should fix their docks behind it. Maybe some of these docks you've got going around, it can be done with just a single dock parallel to the seawall so that they could come in and tie up sideways. That's a lot easier to handle in a current than trying to get into a slip. If you are really totally fixed on adding another ramp, I would suggest you put it at the far right of the property into that other canal coming out of Matlacha Isles.
That's where it's at now on this image. It's right, all the way on the right.
All right, I see two of them down there. Okay,
Yep.
So
And then the bait and tackle shops moved.
yeah, that can work. I would leave D&D basically where it is, and I'm totally against the restaurant. I don't know where you're going to put the cars. If you look at this, if you've got 44 boat trailers and vehicles in there, parked there, where are you going to put the cars for the restaurant? They can't go in the canal that side. You can't cross Pine Island Road. There's a canal over there too. it's going to be a mess, absolute mess. It's already a mess down there with the traffic. I'm absolutely against that restaurant. I would leave D&D where it is. If you really got to serve food, go to Lowe's or Home Depot and talk to one of their hot dog trucks out front and see if they want to move. That might work. But it's seriously, between the current and that canal and the parking issues, this is a bad plan. Really is. I think we should fix what we've got, put in your new seawall, put in those other 2 ramps, as long as they're launching into that canal, that's fine, that makes a lot of sense. But the restaurant is just really gonna mess up this whole thing, confuse it, parking issues everywhere. Either that or sell it. You know, it's so frustrating. I go through there at least once a week by boat. I try to get out on Matlacha most nights, but I've given up on that one. We've got to consider traffic, we've got to consider safety. We're not going to make a big chunk of money out of a restaurant. Excuse me. It's not worth the inconvenience and the safety issues. So that's kind of where I am. I have no problem keeping D&D. I absolutely want them to remain. Maybe upgrade the buildings they're in, or even put something else, something new up. Fix their boat ramp behind the building. Maybe fix up those slips so that they're usable and not dangerous like they are now. The other ramps at the other end of the piece of property. That's it. That's where I'm at, guys.
So, Councilmember Williams, are you saying keep the property and not sell the property?
I'd like to sell the property. Seriously, I'd like to sell the property because no matter what we do, Matlacha is going to have an issue with it. We have never done anything out there in that direction where they haven't come back in our face.
Your conversation was, though, to improve the boat ramp. So how do we do that?
Well, if we're going to keep the property, I'm all right with improving boat ramps because I know we need boat ramps. But my number 1, sell. Number 2, go ahead and go, like what I just went through is okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Stout? I'm sorry, Councilmember Williams, you done?
I'm all done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stout?
Several things. First of all, as you know, I was not on the prevailing side on the annexation. And the reason I felt we should move ahead with the annexation was because, number 1, we own the property. Number 2, I didn't want to see year after year all the taxes on the improved property, to include a restaurant or whatever, going to unincorporated Lee County. That to me made no sense, that we should spend millions of dollars to improve that land and then not collect the ad valorem taxes year after year. So I'm torn between selling it and keeping it because of the fact I know we need the boat slips. But it's just too bad that these people that spoke tonight didn't speak when we had the vote on the annexation, because maybe it could have gone differently. And if we can't grandfather, and you know what, even if we can grandfather the slips to other places, it's going to make the residents in that area unhappy. We already have some unhappiness with increasing slips at the yacht club. And so consequently, if we did this, we'd have a lot of residents that are close by unhappy with the traffic and whatever it brings. The best of all possible worlds would have been if we annexed the property, improved the slips, built the restaurant, and as far as the restaurant not making money, I think anybody up here should know that the boathouse brings in 6 figures every year. So that would be, to me, just the best of all possible worlds. If somebody that was on the prevailing side of the annexation not going through would just bring it back and let's do it. and then I would certainly be in favor. But if we're not going to have that annexation pass, then I just don't see spending millions of dollars to improve the property for unincorporated Lee County to have the yearly ad valorem taxes that would certainly come. The increased value of all that property would bring increased ad valorem taxes, and I hate to see it go to the county. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Kariosha.
Well, ever since this has been going on, if you think the people at Cape Coral want it, it's not showing in the emails I'm getting. I've received one email to keep and purchase and upgrade that property. That doesn't move me at all with just one email. Secondarily, the tax issue is a problem for me, as was for Councilmember Stout. What does it cost this city already in legal fees? The legal fees in this city for that piece of property, it's not going to stop if we move forward and start making more changes. If somebody could tell us what the cost so far in legal fees, I'd appreciate it.
I don't have that, Councilmember Kariosha, but it's certainly something we can request and get to you.
What is the current appraised value? And if we have an appraisal on it, how old is that appraisal?
It's the 2018 $3.6 million appraisal.
Okay. With $3.6 million, how much of that can we use carte blanche?
Yep. So we purchased that with $2.3 million at the time we purchased it in 2012. Stormwater allocated $1.3 million. The general fund was $1 million. So what we know from legal counsel, discussion with legal counsel, is the stormwater fund would have to be repaid the $1.3 million plus some small interest component if we were to surplus it, and then the rest could be utilized for the general fund. So that would be from the 3.6, roughly $2.3 million.
And like Councilmember Gunter brought up, we're also looking at this Chiquita Lock scenario. If and when we do win or lose, it's going to be millions of dollars even to remove it, as well as replacing it if we have to replace that. Is there not a Chiquita Lock fund that was put together by the
Paul Klingon, Public Works. We did put aside some money in stormwater, and there was a fund, and it was about $1 million.
But I had thought that the Chiquita Lock itself had a separate fund put together years ago.
The trust.
Oh, you're talking about the trust. Mike might have some.
The trust.
Got some data on that.
Yeah, the fund that he's talking about that has $1 million in it has those funds in it.
That is, it's including $1 million?
But since the discussions in the court with the Chiquita Lock, that has diminished. So I'd have to get you an update on how much is in that budget, but we had planned to, it would be $1 million to $2 million to remove it.
Right.
And or $1 million to $2 million to just update it to keep the one going. And we had estimated it could be approximately $25 million to do a parallel lock.
Okay. Well, I'm for selling the property, and getting out of there, and taking the money and run. I know there'll be more legal fees attached. I just know it. No matter what we do over there, we're going to be in court. We'll never get it done. So put me down to sell the property. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, the one thing I just want to mention is that if we grandfather those 64 slips out of there to somewhere else, that property's not worth what that appraisal says, because that's what gives it its value. Because if anybody's going to come in there and build, you know, condos or a hotel with a marina, they're going to want every bit of those 64 slips. So when we talk about what the property's worth, if we end up going out and getting an appraisal, we have to talk about what is it going to be worth if there are no slips there, okay? If we can get those slips out somewhere else in the city, it's the most used boat ramp right now in the city. So I think we need to take a look at what it would be worth without that.
Yes, sir. So as far as we determine how many can be transferred, certainly then would have to reappraise, because you're correct. The value of that property is based on the 64 slips. If we diminish that, the property value should go down.
Right. So, then it's a matter of how much money, if we're talking about Chiquita Lock and trying to garnish funds, and 1.6 million, it sounded like, has to go back into the stormwater fund, okay? If we diminish that by utilizing those boat slips somewhere else, then most of that money is going to go back into that stormwater fund and not be available to be used on the Chiquita Lock. And one of the things I want to reference is that, I think, quite frankly, that years ago, whenever it was decided to annex this property and we had opposition from Matlacha, I mean, the way I see it, I don't see any of those people here tonight because they've got what they wanted. What they're looking for is to garnish the legal fees because we lost the case. And that's why we can't give you a number as to what that's costing us, because that's not been negotiated yet. So they're not here because they're done with the annexation piece as we're done with it, because their whole game, in my mind, was not so much to stop the progress of the boat ramps, but once they win the annexation case, now we have to sit there and pay legal fees, and that's what's happening right now. I look at this property and say, if we can grandfather these slips in, as Councilmember Gunter said, in another location somewhere in the city, then we're not losing the slips, but that diminishes the value of the property. So the way I look at it is this is the most used boat ramp. I'm not a big fan of either design that I'm looking at here. I think we need a hybrid design if we are going to move forward, where the boat ramp is where it is on revision 2, but I don't see the restaurant there because the boat trailer parking is all the way on the other side of the parking lot. Okay, so I think there needs to be a hybrid design if we move forward with these two things that we're looking at, where the boat ramp does go over on the other canal. The restaurant, if we do consider it, goes over where the bait shop is right now, because you're also moving it away from all the homes. And I would imagine the restaurant is going to have entertainment to maybe, certain hours of the evening. So you want it away from all that pieces there. The only thing that I fear is that we kind of push forward, to cut off our nose to spite our face, okay? When we have a property to replace these 64 slips, 13.5 million, if we can't grandfather them in somewhere. So I think Councilman Gunter's point is well taken, that let's find out if that is something that's doable, and if it is, where can they be transferred to, and how do we provide access to the water for the people up in the northern section of the city? That's what I'm looking at as far as, if we sell the property and we take those slips away, then what are we going to end up with, as opposed to utilizing those 64 slips right up there? Councilmember Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish that this discussion had preceded the one on annexation, and I also wish that I was able to be here that evening, though my vote wouldn't have swung the decided. It would have been in favor of annexing. Where do these folks park now when they launch?
See if I can get you a picture of the aerial. So if you notice along Pine Island Road, which has the red line,
right,
there's a fence that runs right along Pine Island Road, and so the boat trailers line up. You see, basically stack up along the waterway and then stack up along the fence. And then there's another launch further to the east, and you see the boat launches stack up along here.
All right. So when they park their vehicle, is that not the slip then? Is that what we consider a slip? It's the dry slip.
Correct. So the upland, well, it would be considered a boat trailer parking slip.
So
dry slip is in like a storage.
Okay, and that qualifies as one of the 56, is that the number?
Yeah, a trailer parking would be one.
So folks just park on the dirt right now after
Yes.
they launch? Okay, that answers one of my questions. What I've heard from your presentation is at least 75% of the users of that boat ramp are Cape Coral taxpayers. They're our peeps.
When we
And
did,
that's where they go and
when we
launch.
did the
When you
original
your
analysis,
2014 to 2016, and maybe a more recent analysis would show that it's even higher than 75%. So I believe it's basically used by, a majority is used by Cape Coral taxpayers. I like in your presentation that you show, if we skipped ahead now a few, to the two projected conceptual D&D site plans. I like that we would have a police marine presence here. I think that that adds to our quality of life in that there's so much closer, gives us a second point of access to the waterways and so forth. So I believe that really is necessary in this section of our city. I'm not in favor of selling this property. We have talked about the possibility of transferring the slips to other places, which obviously would diminish the value of this property, but it would enable the city to maintain some of the value in the slips instead, wherever we transfer them to. So although the property itself is diminished, the slip value moves with the slip. So we don't really lose money by transferring the slips. Now, if we transfer the slips or parking spaces, shall we say, that I look at in these conceptual drawings, but not all of them, I have a completely different concept. I love both of these. I think they look great. I wish we had annexed the property, and that wasn't an issue too. I like that you're looking to make it safer in regards to the launching of the boats in a place where the current is not so much of a danger. But if we're able to transfer the slips, why transfer all of them? Why not transfer just some of them? Not have the restaurant, and look at this more as a park. We keep D&D, we keep the boat launches in a safer spot, we pay for those. Maybe we don't have the restaurant. Is the current so swift that we couldn't consider this site for our kayakers and rowers instead of the Tropicana site? I mean, why couldn't we use some of that land, which no longer is useful for boat parking, spaces? Why couldn't we use that for their facilities? Mixing apples and oranges.
No, that's fine.
That may, if you took that off of my suggestions altogether, but just transferring some of those slips and developing the rest as a park, but we keep the ramp. And we keep D&D.
When staff originally came forward, there was no restaurant. City Council, during the input of 12918, actually asked staff during that vote to solicit a P3 as a way to generate revenue to sustain the future maintenance at the park. So it became that wasn't the focus when we originally came forward.
Right.
It was, this is a fishing park where people come that don't even go just to use a boat ramp. You can go there on the weekend and see kids and parents just fishing off the seawall. So we brought forward the park concept, just improving the safety, moving it, and then City Council had asked staff, okay, when you solicit this, solicit for a P3 as a way of generating recurring income to maintain it. So that would go back to what was originally proposed. Non-motorized watercraft are not in play with the Manatee Protection Plan. So if we were to designate this entire park, the 64 slips would be there, but no parking spaces for a kayak would count against the slip count. So in theory, we could then have 64 in-water slips. So and all of the city's improved ramps that we have now, Carrie, right, they allow, you can launch kayaks at any improved ramp. Yes. So these would also allow canoe and kayakers to launch from this site.
So even if we couldn't transfer the slips, we could use it as a better place or a different option maybe for the rowers and the kayakers.
Correct.
That has possibilities. So I would like to keep the property and also keep D&D. I think they provide a wonderful service with, and then the boat ramps, because it's obviously being used better than any other boat ramp in our city. And I don't, And it would be wonderful if we could transfer the slips and recoup some of our investment, but then let's use it for perhaps the kayakers and rowers. It's suitable for that.
You don't have to transfer all, so you can do a partial transfer. So if we were to scale back and remove the P3 and only go with retaining the in-water slips was a majority for the restaurant, because without the waterfront slips, the boaters aren't going to go there. They're going to want to drive. So we had retained some of those because of the P3. So no, we could scale back to just having 44 boat launch spaces and then look at transferring the other 20. I mean, you don't have to transfer all of them, but I still think we do need to get the answer to Councilmember Gunter's question, which we did ask last week. We know we can transfer slips, but can we transfer grandfather slips that exceed what you'd be allowed normally under the Manatee Protection Plan? It's just a small nuance that they're having to check with the state on.
And now the Marine Police presence there, does that require use of any of those slips?
I do not know if a law enforcement dock counts against the Manatee. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. I asked that question. They do count. There's no exclusion for public safety. I forgot we did ask that question too.
Okay. And then let me just look at my notes here.
So if there was a fire boat there and one police, then we would, for public access, would be at like 62.
Okay. So that's where my thoughts are. I would like to retain the property, and someday I hope we revisit the annexation. Legal fees are a nightmare, but we have a very good legal staff, and we can get help if necessary. But I think that retaining it pretty much the way it is and fixing it, let's fix the boat ramps or move them, and take a look at it as another location for our rowers and kayakers. That's it, I'm done.
Thank you. One thing I just wanted to mention real quick is that, maybe years ago when we decided to annex it first, maybe we should have developed it first under the rules of the county, and then once it was done and they saw what they liked that was there, potentially we could have annexed it later, and maybe we wouldn't have had the fight. So we might have gone backwards. Councilmember Nelson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to speak my piece, and then I'm going to race out of here. Take me and my germs elsewhere. Hearing what all my council teammates say, I had the exact same thought as Councilmember Gunter. I actually went through the Chiquita Lock a few weeks ago on an 80-foot long boat and 16-foot wide boat through that Chiquita Lock, and I mean, people were high-fiving and hooting and hollering when we actually got the boat through the lock. But I had that exact thought that, we're going to have to pay for the legal fees for this, and maybe selling this property in Matlacha would help cover that cost. My other question, I guess, for you, Mr. L. Chisholm, is when you talk about the grants, I know the last time we had a meeting about this, you kind of laid them all out for us. So the grants that we already have, could we utilize those grants currently, like tomorrow, if we wanted to fix the existing ramps and parking lot?
The grant that we have today is a design grant through the FW's Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation FBIP program. It's only to design the improvements that would eventually be constructed.
Okay.
We had a WCIND construction grant to improve the seawall, and we worked with the routes, we worked with the D&D tenants to make sure that what we were doing wasn't going to impact their business. It did include redoing the finger piers, it did doing the seawall, but because of these designs don't utilize that ramp, and included improving that ramp, adding an ADA access to that. But because these designs moved the boat ramp out of the main channel, which was the #1 concern for our residents in the Northwest, it wasn't right for us to spend those taxpayer dollars and then come behind it in a couple of years and rip them out.
Sure.
So we returned that grant.
Okay, no, I agree with that. Well, I would say yes, let's wait and get the answer to the moving of the boat slips. But I also am in favor for selling this property. I'm saddened that D&D is caught in the crossfire of all of this. I know that after speaking with our Parks and Recs director, we generate about $6,500 a month from them between rent, sales tax, boat slip rentals, boat ramp fees, sorry. So we are generating revenue from it. If there's any way also that we could get a more updated appraisal, I think we asked for that last time. If we could get a more updated appraisal, maybe Ms. Andrews, and you could get that to council, that would be helpful to see.
Yes, I think the best thing is when we determine how many slips we can transfer, then look at that value.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's
'cause that
fine.
would potentially diminish.
I think with that number, I think we'd all be able to make a much more educated decision. And then also, if we get the most current appraisal, maybe it's something that, we don't have to sell the property tomorrow. Maybe we push it down a little bit, and maybe depending on the boat slip situation, property value looks like it's going to increase. Maybe we hold on to it, at least until we see some of these other costly things like the lock or development of Seven Islands or Bimini Basin come to fruition. Maybe we just hold steady. So that would be my recommendation. But I too am for selling this property once we get the information on the boat slips and the value, the appraisal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cosner?
Thank you, Mayor. I hate to kick this can down the road, but I'm not prepared to make any decision without the information about grandfathered slips. I need to know if we can transfer them, but I am leaning towards keeping it and improving it. So that's my.
The question has already been asked, and it's on its way. We're just waiting for the reply.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all,
you.
Mayor.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that is a possibility is the Burnt Store Boat Ramp has a large piece of land just to the north of it, about the same size as the Burnt Store Boat Ramp. Is there any reason we can't put two more ramps there and move maybe half of the slips to that piece of property?
Yeah, so back in several years ago when we went through this, Councilmember Gunter also asked that question. We researched that with Lee County. That site is on the lake where there is a designated warm water congregation area in the Manatee Protection Plan. So although there is upland lands that could be paved and improved, it would not be an eligible recipient site to accept any manatee slips. So we cannot improve that anymore. It's at its max that would ever be allowed.
Mr. Zerler?
Okay, that was worth a try.
Thank you. I was talking with Dawn Andrews and asked, even if we can transfer all of the 64 slips, it might be good to get two appraisals, one with the entire transfer and then one with a partial transfer, and then council could make a decision as well.
Find out first, though.
Another thought, and I'm not really inclined to do a whole lot for Matlacha right now, but if we were to take this piece of property, eliminate the restaurant, put in those two new boat ramps to the east, and keep the remaining property as a parking area, that would be plentiful, obviously, for the boat ramps, but it would also be a benefit for that traffic situation down there where people could park in there and double up in friends' cars and everything to go out, restaurants and everything out on Pine Island. That's the thing that land should really be, is some sort of a parking lot to relieve the pressure on Pine Island Road. But I don't see us spending the money to do that as a favor for Matlacha. If they want to buy it, they can do it. Does Matlacha want to buy that land? Anyway, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Stout?
Yes, I agree with Councilmember Welsh. I don't think we should sell it. And moving the slips again to other spots would make the residents in those areas unhappy. It's already, the yacht club already has residents that are resistant to additional boats. So I'm going to have faith that if we build this, then the next council might agree to annex. Maybe we did do it in the wrong order, but I would not be in favor of selling.
Thank you. The other question I have, I know that if we did move forward with development, it would be under the rules of the county and their regulations. If there's no restaurant there, we're paying the property taxes to the county. But if there's a fuel dock there, do we have any idea what type of revenue that a fuel dock might generate to give us some relief?
No, the revenues that we get from the boathouse are combined, right? It's
Strictly food.
strictly
Yeah.
food, so,
So we don't
no.
even
And
know-
there is none in this area. I mean, we did a search, that was part of the reason that we included the fuel dock here. We did a search, and the nearest permitted is like all the way up in Pineland, all the way through the Matlassay Pass up at Jug Creek Marina.
Do we know if we, I mean, do we know the different scenarios of how much tax dollars would be paid on today's dollars to the county, depending upon whether we develop it with a restaurant, without a restaurant, with a fuel dock, without a fuel dock? We don't have any of that information. I'd like some of that
We
information.
can get all that, look at the potential revenue from fuel and have all those numbers.
Right.
But the key, it sounds like, is that transfer of the
Slips.
slips, then the value of the land, and then we can look at all that for the potential revenue generation and taxes, et cetera.
Thank you.
One key point on the taxes is just like the yacht club. So the entire yacht club itself is not taxable. It's mostly exempt from taxes, but the portion of land that houses the restaurant is what the property appraiser's office considers the commercial activity, and only that portion with the restaurant generates taxes. Same thing with the D&D. Only the part where they're generating commercial income and revenue from that one area is taxable to the city. The rest of it is still exempt.
So what you're saying is if we eliminate the restaurant and develop a park-like setting with fishing areas and a boat ramp and parking for trailers, and then we have D&D in their building or something similar, paying
It would be about the same.
about the same as what is, so we need to.
Or
know
if
what
we,
that is.
and hypothetically, let's say, hypothetically, no D&D, no commercial activity, we could have this as a park with zero taxes. But once you put the commercial activity in there, that portion of land becomes taxable. And yes, and in the leases, D&D pays the, right, the city doesn't have any.
Right, right. We pay the leases covering most of the,
Correct. And we'll look at the fuel, if there's a fuel sale.
I think we
look at
need some
that.
comparisons as to what we're talking about from a, not only with the slips, but the whole,
Like a financial analysis on it.
exactly. Councilmember Welsh?
We're looking to develop 7 islands or have someone do that. Does this have any, what word do I want to use? Would this have any benefit to that if we kept the boat slips there and we use them on water? Because if the 7 Islands develops and there are high-end residences there, paying taxes that are enough to contribute back towards services, sometimes they come with high-end boats. I don't see enough space really to put a mooring in for a yacht, but if we, like, and I thought of this as Councilmember Nelson was saying, maybe now is not the time that we consider selling this property. Maybe it's a little bit down the road for another council to decide whether to annex it or sell it. But I really like the idea of it being a park and maintaining D&D. And then down the road, as the city continues to develop, this may have more value with the boat slips left intact with it.
So interesting, the original owner that we worked with when we were doing this, the original intent for them at the 7 Islands was to have 7 Islands be the residential development and have a warehouse of dry slips that would operate like a marina. So somebody from the 7 Islands could call this property, drive down here, have their boat put in the water, and then go on. But we do, the 7 Islands does have its own amount of manatee protection plan slips, and before we marketed that, we did do that analysis with Lee County, so we know exactly how many dock slips or dry slips or wet slips or trailer parking can be done as part of a 7 Islands development. So they do have their own. They're not any more than what would be the traditional, so like, it would be like more like the 17. There's not any grandfathered slips there.
Thank you.
Thank you. To wrap it up, I think what we'll do, since it's their tradition and livelihood, I'm going to give the gentleman from D&D just a couple minutes to get up and say a few words, but
Just address something that.
just keep it brief and...
Yes, I will, sir. I would just like to bring up the fact that when we were here for the annexation meeting, most of the people that were here from the Matlacha Council and everybody from Pine Island that were against the annexation, the main reason is because their fear was that high-rises or condos, that's all they screamed about was the wildlife and high-rise and condos. But and everybody's concerned about the legal fees of getting the property annexed and returning the revenue back to the city of Cape Coral. In my opinion, and from being in the shop and the people that come through and all of the rumors and talk that's been floating around recently, it is, in my very strong opinion, and I think if you maybe took a poll or even discussed this, or maybe you all could get together with the Matlacha Civic Association and different people and maybe have a plan that, you know, if you show them that, look, all you want to do is make the property better, give it a facelift, keep it for the community, and it benefits all the residents of Cape Coral, it benefits Matlacha, it benefits Pine Island. It's a win-win situation. And I think if that was shown to them, that was the plan, the intention, and that there isn't any high-rises going in, just like you said. And see, they didn't realize, even 2 years ago when these plans were drawn up, that's what the main intention was. It was never an intention to put in high-rises. It was always to keep it the ramps and not lose the slips in the ramps. And I strongly believe, and I hope you all do too, that if you did show them that, look, it's not going anywhere, we're starting to do the products, you know, even just paving the park lot, and show them that it's going to stay the way it is and not change and get high rises, I think you would get rid of all the legal costs of annexation, and that could go towards all this too. The money you would save in the legal fees towards it trying to get it annexed, and then it would be very easy to annex the property. I don't think they would have any problem with Cape Coral annexing the property if they knew it was just going to stay the same way it is and the same way it's been serving the community. And not only that, the revenue that could go back from having tournaments, it would be a lot easier to have fishing tournaments and all the stuff and get more revenue to come back towards the city. And once it was easier for you all to annex it again, then you're getting the full tax money, and it'd be a lot easier to get the funding to continue. So maybe if it just started a proposal for just one phase to show faith that it's not changing, that it's not going to be what they're also fearful of, that it's not going to be high rises and condos and everything, then the annexation could go through a lot more easier, and then you'd be able to get the rest of the funding to continue the rest of the project.
Thank you.
And that's just something that I would wish everybody
One of the things that I don't think you realize is that back in March of 2018, we approved the fact that we wanted to do a boat ramp and we wanted to do a restaurant. We never talked about high rises or condos or any of those things. And it goes back to what I said earlier. You know, there's nobody here tonight because they got to the point where we're not annexing the property at this point. They're
Yes,
fighting for the legal fees based on that case, and that's what I think they were looking for.
Yes,
They're
I
at that point. So if we're going to go forward with this development, it's not going to be through the annexation, it's going to be through the county. And then we come back in later if we so decide, or a future council decides to look to annex the property after we've put the items in there that we think we want to do. So I appreciate you coming to the podium. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Ilchism, and thank you for your input.
Thank you for your time.
The Cary Parks Director just gave me some information. When we were switching from Casey's to Ford's Boathouse, we still were the city was running with its own staff and did some upgrades to the fuel pumps. In the 6 to 7 months where we were operating, whether it's 6 or 7, the city collected $615,000 in revenue. So it was about $100,000 a month. So and this boat ramp is used more than the yacht club.
Right. So it would make sense if we didn't move forward with a restaurant, maybe to move forward with a fuel dock, and maybe even somehow partner with D&D on operating the fuel dock and do a P3 along those lines, along with their bait shack.
Yeah, if you just transferred it over about 1.2 million a year, if you're looking at improving this all in one shot, that would be, about a 4-year ROI, and then you have that revenue in
Okay,
perpetuity.
sounds like we got a lot of information that we need to bring forward and bring back, so we can then look at it objectively. Mr. Zerlag, did you take a tally of what was going on? Do you have a sense of where we're going?
Thank you, yes. The first thing we're going to do is find out through Mr. Ilchism if the slips are transferable in terms of what number. And assuming that we can transfer all the slips, we're going to still get 2 appraisals, one for transferring of all the slips and one for a partial transfer. Come back to council, let you know that. We'll firm up the numbers Mike had given you on the fuel docks as well. And again, come back with another presentation.
Do we want a third appraisal if we don't transfer any slips and we sell the property? Because I think the one we have, 3.6, was done a while back, wasn't it?
2018.
That's a few years ago.
2 years?
2 years.
Can we find out the taxes that the boathouse?
We can get 3 appraisals. We'll get 3. We'll get it as is, and then transferring all the slips and then transferring a portion thereof. We'll get 3.
Okay, and then some of the other information about the taxes, if we go along the lines of with no restaurant, with the restaurant, with the D&D, just get us kind of a financial analysis and take all that into consideration.
We'll be happy to do that.
I think council would appreciate that. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, any other roundtable discussion on any other topic? Anybody have anything they want to bring forward? Time and place of future meetings. A regular meeting of Cape Coral City Council is scheduled for Monday, February 3rd, 2020 at 4:30 p.m. in council chambers. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.